Hey everyone, it's time for the Sunday comic book talk show. It's something we do every week, in case you didn't know. It happens every Sunday morning, but I guess that part is pretty clear. If you think that we are negative, we promise we are totally sincere. It's the Sunday morning comic book talk show, and here we go. Let's go!
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sunday kind of afternoon comic talk show. And I'm here. I haven't really been talking a lot this week. We ended up having our DC Comics podcast Patreon only, and there wasn't an Absolute book, so I didn't have that live stream. So it feels like it's been quite some time since I've done a live stream, and during the week, the normal things happen with me, which includes just nonsense like drinking coffee and realizing I drank a whole cup of ants, which is good though, because I'm on a keto diet now, and they're fully keto friendly. I actually looked it up. It ends up saying they are fully keto friendly, so that is a plus, right? And I ended up having to move my coffee maker. That we have so many ants in this house right now, but we have no walls. Maybe that's what it was. Not even walls in the bathroom. But here we are, and I figured from here on out we would have some topics that we could talk about. We don't have to just talk about the main topic, which if you see the banner, everything going on there, it's about the New 52. I've been promising to talk a bit about the New 52 for quite some time now, and figured that, this would be as good a time as any. But also, yesterday was Free Comic Book Day, and I'd love to hear what people got, some of their stories. I had a story way back. The last time I went to a Free Comic Book Day was about 10 years ago, when we actually had a comic book store that was somewhat close to us. And when I went with my two youngest sons. They were having a ball. We ended up getting some stuff. Well, we were picking up some things, and we were getting all ready. And then the guy who owned the store, who, not to be mean or anything, but was a real douchebag, ended up yelling at me about my kids because they got near a case that had like a couple statues in it. They weren't even looking at the statues. It wasn't like they were like, jumping around or whatever. We were just walking, and the guy just ended up just yelling at my kids. And I think we had, each of them grabbed about 2 or 3 free comic book stuff, but I also had like 3 trades that I think it was that each of us, I wanted to buy a trade so that, you're giving some money to the store, whatnot. And I just put the stuff down and said, fuck off, and left, and got so pissed off and just kind of stormed out. And then my kids were upset, but they didn't realize that I was making a stand. And again, my kids, they're not exactly the most well-behaved kids, but a couple of my sons, including my youngest two, they do have some problems that I have with attention problems, whatever. But they weren't doing anything at that point, and kind of ruined the day for us, that guy. And the guy's store went out of business about a year later, so that kind of is telling. The guy was a real jerk. But yeah, there was a bunch of books that came out for Free Comic Book Day. I only ended up being able to read the one that had the Dan Slott, like the all-in special 2025 that had the Dan Slott Superman story that I do believe it's like the first 10 pages of the first issue that will come out from, I think it's, Superman Unlimited, something like that. And then had that little sneak peek stuff with the Absolute Universe, which was pretty cool. Me and Gray ended up reviewing it on our podcast. But once again, this week's DC podcast, which I'm still editing, I think it's probably about 5 hours long, a little shorter than recently. But that is Patreon only. So if you did want to check that out, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/Weird Science. Sign up for as little as $1. This is the commercial part of things. And also, if you want, you could get a free weekly trial, and you can end up, checking out some stuff. And Matt Fisher says, there was no Friday show. I'm having withdrawal. I know. Me and Gray, at one point, me and Gray were going to have a kind of a side absolute show. We were going to get together and talk about just the absolute books, maybe rank them, whatever it would be. Unfortunately for me, I guess, but he ended up having some friends roll into town. So he went out with his friends, which made the only time that we were able to actually talk about the stuff for the regular DC podcast, which we talked about the last Halloween. We ended up doing that, but couldn't go live. I still was going to pop in, but me and Gray, I think it was like Saturday or Friday, I think we recorded, the whole sessions took about 4 hours because we ended up yapping about weird stuff and all that craziness and whatnot. But I'm looking at the live chat right now, because if you are listening to this in the recap, you should come and visit us live. Now, I haven't been exactly on time with things, and even this one, I ended up saying I was going to start at 1, had to change it to 1:15 because my dog was begging me to go for a walk. But I end up where Sunday mornings at some point, Sunday afternoon, whatever, we'll pop in. But if you do subscribe and do hit on the notifications, it'll let you know when we do end up going live. But we have American Texan says, my LCS has local artists and authors come in for free comic book day. I got my first art piece, Nexus, by Brian Salinas. He gave me a great deal, and there aren't many artists approved to draw and sell Nexus. So that is a pretty cool. And then you have some people talking about what the main topic is. New 52, JK say, I enjoyed parts of New 52, but not all. The Batman partial reset was hard to understand, but having a new entry was a positive. And that's one of the things we'll probably end up talking about. And I will warn everybody, this is not going to be a lesson. We're not going to ding the bell and go to class where I'm going to give you, all of the information about the New 52. We'll more talk about what each of us liked and why we hated it, liked it, whatever the case may be. I will go on record, as I always have, that unlike Fusebox 23, who says hated it, if you're going to do a reboot, do a full reboot, not a hybrid reboot. The only things that didn't reboot were Green Lantern and Batman, and then a bit of things like the Legion stuff, but that was wacky anyway. It was because they were afraid that people wouldn't buy the trades of Batman, and also they were worried. Again, some of the things that they didn't reboot the Green Lantern stuff because they thought the fans would freak out, because the biggest things in the past couple of years up to that were, Blackest Night and Brightest Day and all the Green Lantern stuff that went on, so they didn't want to reboot that. Again, when you end up going and you sit there and say, well, they should have rebooted Batman, maybe. But if you did, we still wouldn't be up to Jason Todd, probably. I mean, that's the crazy thing. They wanted to have all the Robins. It didn't make sense. But what the hell makes sense anytime in the deal when you have it almost felt like to me when people are like, you have 5 Superman books, you have a Justice League, Superman's doing different things in each book, and then somebody's going to complain of how is he there when he was there, here, and whatnot. Some of the things you just have to kind of let go. But we'll get into this with it. I'm still looking at some of the comments. I'm having problems today. And in fact, I actually realized I don't know that I took my medicine yet. We're going to have to do live medicine taking on there. I don't think that this is allowed on YouTube, but I think I will. I'm going to go because I'm not able to concentrate. So in that, you also have half rebooting after Secret Wars 2015 is what really sealed Marvel's demise. They should have stuck their guns. Thing is, Marvel does these weird things where, for the most part, I always say they seem to reset within books, but not totally. So they kind of get out of that whole comment. Like DC now, people will go online. People will yell all the time that they rebooted 7 times yesterday. But some of the things are initiative names, and they have to watch. DC has to watch themselves. When they end up renaming something, people will automatically assume it's a reboot. And since the New 52, you've had a couple resets. You've had a couple things going on. Rebirth was, hey, we're sorry about what we did. We're going to do it. But the continuity kind of remained the same. But I was on record again as saying that after Death Metal, they should have boomed. That things weren't going well. I think they should have. And this is what I said. Not a reboot, but a reboot. Basically going back to, hey, everybody, we're just going to go back to the main timeline. Everything works, but explain it. And where I said the big thing that I thought was when you had that future state, Scrap that crap. All that was the notes that Dan Didio had left in his desk about the 5G that they grabbed because they fired him and didn't have a plan. What they should have done is, instead of those 2 months with the future state, what they should have done is say, when Wonder Woman, and if you're aware, Wonder Woman opened up the timeline to defeat Perpetua at the end of Death Metal. Timeline's open. All right, that's awesome. That's like a back to the boot. And then what you do is, the next 2 months, every single book, major book, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, you spend those 2 months hashing out what that means. You have 2 issues for each, maybe even go 4. I don't know. But the idea is, spell it out then what that current continuity is, and then go forward with it. And I think it would have been so much better than a lot of the crap, because you ended up going, and again, you had people yelling and screaming, oh my God, we rebooted 17 times. Infinite Frontier, then Dawn of DC, then New All In, all that nonsense. But some of that stuff, and even Infinite Frontier, got pushed aside, brought back, renegotiated. Oh, it's crazy. Yes. And Brandon is here. Holy moly. What is he? He's here. He's probably at this moment in the parking lot of the Bills Stadium, just doing, because that's what he does on Sunday mornings. He ends up there, and he's probably drunk with his guys who are wearing their denim vests. But yeah, so all that said and done, the New 52 is, to me, where I'm always going to have a better feeling for it than a lot of other people, because lo and behold, that's what got me into comics. I was not a comic reader until I started reading the New 52. And if you even look back, and if people aren't aware, because sometimes people come on YouTube and they think, oh man, this guy, this new guy, this young gun, look at him. We started our blog or website, WeirdScienceDCComics.com. We started in 2013. Now, I started, and I didn't start reading the New 52 right when it came out in 2011. What happened was, I ended up getting a job and working with my man Eric, who was the guy who did all the stuff with me up until recently. But he ended up where I started working. I've told this story a lot of times, but I ended up starting to work with him in about 2012. So when I first started, I was actually hired for him to train me to replace him, because lo and behold, the guy legitimately 1 year had like 115 sick days. And they got sick of it. They thought they were being clever. They thought that they were going to hire me. He was going to train me, and then they would fire him. The problem is they never did fire him, because they wanted me, and it was weird. They wanted us to hate each other. And we kind of became really good friends. And it was comics that did it, because the day or week or whatever, right when I was hired, was when the second round of books came out in the New 52, and you ended up having the Earth 2 book comes out, and they had the big news, and it was big news. It was on not just the crazy idea of having the news sites or comic sites following stuff. There were some big news, and the big news, Alan Scott was gay. And so the big thing that was out and about is, oh my God, that Green Lantern's gay. So everybody knew that Eric liked comics and loved Green Lantern. He used to wear this one Green Lantern shirt, I swear, 3 times a week. I don't know if he washed it or not. I'm not really sure. That's not for me to say. But he ended up where people kept coming in, and we're doing our thing and we're working, but people would walk by to go to their stations and things like that. And they would say, oh man, I heard your Green Lantern's gay. And his big thing was, he'd say, oh, which one? Like, that was his, dig. Like, oh, which Green Lantern? And everybody would be like, what? And they'd walk away. And every time he'd turn to me, I always say it. It's almost like the Bubba Gump shrimp deal, where Bubba would be like, and then we got this shrimp. He would turn, that's true, because there's a lot of Green Lanterns. And I'm like, oh, really? And we hadn't been, this is probably like 4 days of working together that we rarely said anything to each other. But then he started telling me all about the Green Lanterns. The problem is probably why I'm not a huge Green Lantern fan right now, because I got enough from him. But no, he started talking, and I started asking him about comics. At that point, I was really into video games. And so I ended up where I'm like, oh, what about this? What about that? And then he ends up just offhand saying, oh, you know what? There's this new thing. They rebooted anyway. I'm out. And Eric was one of those guys. He was done. He was completely done. He said they ruined the continuity, and he's a continuity kid. That's all he cares about. He's like, it's bullshit. I've been following these books for this long. They could go stuff it. And I'm like, really? What did you just say about this? And again, when people look back and the people who are upset about the continuity rebooting, most of the people I talked to, including myself, I didn't know what the hell that meant. So I didn't jump onto the books because the continuity changed. I jumped on because all the books had number ones. That's it. I, usually had like number twos, then number one. I mean, seriously. But the idea, though, if they didn't change the continuity, and people still would have been mad, but if they just gave all new number ones saying, hey, everybody, we're not quite rebooting, but we're resetting numbering so that everybody can go on and make the story so that you could jump on, make a couple of things, maybe a little bit of a recap for some people or whatever, I still would have joined in. It was not anything about me like, oh, continuity, I don't know the past stories. I am just an anal guy in more ways than one, I think. But the idea of me not knowing where to start, it was a thing, still probably is, the idea of, asking people, being afraid that you're going to get made fun of, actually finding a comic store that would be able to guide you. Because at that point, we didn't even have a comic store in town. The closest one was probably 45 minutes away at that point. And, it's not 45. I'm not driving 45 minutes to go to see something that I don't even know anything about or even know that I want to get involved. If there was a comic store in town, I probably would have walked in and checked it out. But in the meantime, there wasn't anything at that moment. So all I had was Eric telling me about these books and how much he hated the idea of a reboot. But I heard this number one in the deal, and I'm like, yep, I am in. And yeah, I always said the number ones are funds is the deal. And I used to even have things where I would start and like, number ones are for me. I'm in, because then I know where to start. One of the big plays of why I ended up loving manga when I started, you don't even have to ask anybody about manga. You just start at number one. Boom, you're in. And so that's what got me into it. Later then, realizing, even after Eric was yelling at me about it, but realizing the idea of, I guess people would be upset because now I've gone through the process of things going. But I really am on the line of, if you start something new, you should give the benefit of a number one. And again, this is an argument that people, and we could even have another whole thing about it because people yell at me a lot about it. I also, and again, all this comes from just your personal deal. I don't collect comics. I have always read digitally. I probably have ever I bought a couple trades, but actually floppies. I probably bought 6 in my life, and they all happened just because I was in them and I'm vain like that, need them. I actually got some of those slabbed and signed. And if you wanted to know, me and Eric were both in Ben Percy's Green Arrow book probably about 6 times. Then we were in the Trinity book. V. Ken Marion did the art in that, I think, twice. We were in an Aquaman digital only story, and then I was in the Old Man Logan over at Marvel. So I should have my own wiki entry. And some of the fun parts of that is every time we showed up, we died. We'd get killed viciously. So it was pretty cool. And Common Sense says, yeah, you can start chapter 1 in Indie Comics 2. Said current audiences don't treat indie comics important as manga. It mainly because here's the thing, Common Sense. If you name me, of the, say, how many come out each week? Indie, 30. How many are going past 6? I think that's it. Now, the ones that are looked at as, Invincible or Walking Dead or even the Ghost Machines, you see people get behind those, but a lot of times they're just minis, and people aren't going to really get that into with the minis. And Riley asked who signed those. Yes, it was me. I signed them. You're the best, Jim. Love, Jim. I actually had Ben Percy signed a couple of them. I don't even think he knew why I was wanting to get them signed. I don't think he ever knew that we were in those. He's not a real big fan. But it was Juan Ferreira who did the art, and he ended up sending me something. He's a great guy. Again, these are ones, though, that you say, Common Sense, that they're those are the big ones that a lot of people like, but not even that. But they're nowhere going to be near a My Hero or a a One Piece or things like that. But in the meantime, I don't know. It's just what it is. But I like a lot of indie books as well. It's just that the ones that end up pretty cool, sometimes they just kind of go away. But yeah, so I'm going to look at some of the chat here, but that's kind of the background. I got a hold of some books. The first book that I read, I just kind of got lucky. I ended up reading the Jeff Johns Aquaman, and I really did like it. And I ended up saying, Eric, oh my God. And I think I ended up getting like 8 issues or something, because again, when I start, this is the other part of this stupid story. When I decided that I had to read, pretty much when Eric was talking, whatever, when I went to look, the 0 issues, if you remember that nonsense, those had already come out. So I ended up jumping on, and I'm like, oh, well, 0 comes before. So I still got confused. 0 comes before 1. So I ended up, I'm like, yes, all right. And Enzo, 2 and 4, Enzo, it's when there are some parademons, and they end up attacking, and me and Eric are running, screaming and yelling from them, which is pretty funny. But yeah, so the 0 issues came out. I read a bunch of the 0 issues. I was confused. Then I looked into some things. Okay, but I ended up reading Aquaman and went into Eric and said, oh my God, you got to read this. It's really good. And he did not want to. It took a while. It took a couple months for me reading, because then I'm like, it was more on the Mondays. I'd come in after a weekend. I'd be like, oh my God, I read this Frankenstein Age of the Shade. It was pretty cool. And then I kept going. There's some stinkers, and we'll get into some of the books. But eventually he decided, when he ended up getting World's Finest was the one. And Brandon will attest to this. He got this World's Finest, and it was not good. It was not good at all. It was with Huntress and Power Girl. And every month he would tell me, oh my God, this book stinks. This is the worst book. And then he'd go to the comic store again that next weekend, and he'd get every month he'd keep getting it. And he's like, if this next one is bad, I'm dropping it. He never dropped it. He got everyone. He was yelling the other one. He picked a lot of really bad books. He ended up having that first Teen Titans. He ended up with World's Finest, though he did really like Earth 2. But all of this was me and him going. And like I said, I would wait. He would read or get his pull list on Saturdays, because then he had a buddy that owned a shop that he could go to and get some stuff, and he would get that stuff. But in the meantime, it wasn't really a comic shop. It wasn't a flea market. It was nonsense. The guy barely had anything, but he would get stuff for Eric. And so Eric had the stuff, and he'd go in. And at one point, he went from nothing to his pull list was like $300. In fact, it was one of the most money that this guy would get. So the one time we had to work a Saturday, and his buddy actually called our work to ask where he was, because he needed the money from his pull list. But in the meantime, he started reading a bunch of things, and we would talk about it. We would talk all week. So we'd read the stuff. He'd read all his pull list on Saturday. I'd read a lot of digital stuff and some older stuff, and we would talk each day. And eventually, we started looking at the comic book roundup. We were reading a lot of reviews, all these things with that. And I ended up saying, we should just do our own site, because some of these reviews are nonsense. And a lot of the books at that point, people weren't really reviewing a lot of things. Wonder Woman wasn't getting a ton of reviews. And I was like, oh my God, that was when me and Eric used to get in a fight, because I thought the Trinity, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, he thought it should be Superman, Batman, Hal Jordan. And we would argue about that, even though Hal Jordan's not even his favorite Lantern. It was Kyle Rayner. But we ended up deciding, and we finally did do, make a website. But we hadn't, maybe if people are listening, the idea of us doing a website, we didn't just decide, okay, we actually decided we want to do a website, and waited about 9 months to read every book, get everything set, and then we did the thing in 2013. And then we wanted to do a podcast, but we didn't think we were ready for that. So we legitimately reviewed books for 2 whole years. Then we started a podcast. So I think that was a bit of a difference than just yelling, oh my God, let's just start this and be wacky about it. Though we didn't have many plans, but that's kind of our background. But with the New 52, when it did come out, like I said, I read Aquaman. I loved it. I thought it was great. I go on record as well as saying I never thought that Aquaman was a joke. I always loved Aquaman. I think his powers are awesome. I always wanted to breathe underwater. In fact, it led me to almost drown one time because I thought that Trident gum would make me be able to breathe underwater like Marine Boy. It didn't work. But I like that was my first deal. And I didn't even know who Jeff Johns was. I just kind of got lucky with that. Then I started looking, reviews and things and saying, oh my God, I was pretty lucky. But I ended up reading mostly just about every book. And for the first round of books, that first wave, have done a podcast on each of the first trades of them all on our New 52 review. So I've read every New 52 book. I've just, done more things with that first round. And so when you had the New 52 come out, obviously 52 books, they end up rebooting. They're going to have 52 new books. They're going to have number ones, and you're going to pull in the Wildstorm and the Vertigo stuff into the deal, which was supposed to be that big play that kind of ended up doing something later. But the whole idea of coming out of Flashpoint into that was that they needed to strengthen the universe because of this big bad threat, Dr. Manhattan, you have that. But with that, I didn't know anything about that. I just ended up, I hadn't even read Flashpoint. So I had read that later, obviously. But the idea of the books, when they came in, you end up where Yule said, and it's funny, like the idea now, I think Yule's right, because he says New 52 was okay, but kind of useless too. Frankenstein was the best. It seemed like they thought they needed to do it more than maybe they needed to do it. And then when they did it, they kind of got caught up in that, and it took a bit, and then it kind of fell apart. But again, it got me into things and got me reading. And yeah, Frankenstein Ages of Shade was my second book I read. And I just picked it because it was weird. The title was crazy. I'm like, I don't even know what this means. I'm going to get it. It's pretty cool. And I loved it. I thought it was great. Made me become a big Jeff Lemire fan. But then some of the other books, and we could go through some of the deal and go through the stuff. I'll read some comments in a second. But some of the other things, and it's funny too, because I'm usually now a guy who likes, I don't like the dark side of things. I don't really like the magic stuff. I don't really like that sort of thing. But yet a lot of the books that I first picked up, I ended up grabbing stuff because I had never heard of them. I had heard, obviously, of Superman, Wonder Woman, all that stuff going on, most of the Bat family. But I had never heard of Animal Man. Didn't know what Animal Man was. So I ended up reading that mainly, too, because then Jeff Lemire, I'm like, okay, I'll read that. Then stuff like All-Star Western, I ended up starting to read that, not knowing that, Palmiotti, and he had done it before and all that stuff. I had no idea that this was a continuing thing. So I ended up picking up that, never had read a Western, and loved it. And it's Palmiotti and Gray. I couldn't remember Justin Gray. Justin Gray's deal. I used to talk to Justin Gray a lot, too. And yeah, I actually really, really enjoyed All-Star Western. And I think that when I went through the books, I'm trying to look, I think the first book that I read in the stuff that I was going through that I didn't really like was Batman the Dark Knight. Was that series. I ended up reading that, and I was like, yeah, that's not great. So I ended up from there going back to some of the obscure things. But again, I still think that some people will pish-posh the New 52, even though maybe they have a book or two. They're like, oh my God, that's awesome. Like I get, there are people who this one guy I did talk to at one point, and he ended up saying like, oh man, New 52 was awful. It was the worst. Like at that point, I only had like 5 books on my pull list. I'm like, how many DC books do you have on your pull list now? He's like, what? I have 2. Well, I guess it wasn't that bad. It did fall apart, but I'm going to go and look at some of the comments because I was talking a lot before I saw that. And you end up where, well, it is true. I was told not to bring logic into anything. Common Sense at Earth 2 did start out great, but it later became a mess. If people don't remember, Tom Taylor ended up jumping on that at the one point at the end. That was when I really did like Tom Taylor. I thought it was pretty cool. And Jared from Comics League, me and Jared talked about it, that the New 52 got him into reading comics. We actually bonded, I think, when we said, same with me. And again, it's because I was scared. I was scared. I didn't have anybody to ask. I didn't know. And I see, oh man, Batman, whatever. And like, where would I start? And I could look it up, but then look it up now. Where should I start reading Batman? And 10 people will give you 50 different answers. So I just didn't know. So I wanted to get into it. I always did, but I just never knew when. And unlike a lot of people, I just didn't grab just a random issue, which a lot of people will say, oh, I got a crazy issue of this, or my aunt gave me a Doom Patrol issue or whatever. I just didn't have that. And Riley said, which one was gay? The one with the wife or kids? It was Earth 2, a deal with that. So some of the reasons why a lot of people, again, a lot of times when people did get upset and like, oh, they changed this, or they got rid of that person or whatever, again, I had no connection with that. I had no connection with anything before. So when I went on, I was just going with these stories. And I will end up saying, too, with that, when people, and that Tim Sheridan, that book was terrible. His Green Lantern Alan Scott book was god-awful. And the reason why it was god-awful in my mind had nothing to do with sexuality. It had to do with that's all he talked about, and didn't really give any sort of entry point for people to understand a different kind of Green Lantern, obviously, with, the living flame and things like that. He completely neglected that and just went the opposite way. And I think already people were turned off. But in the meantime, it was what it was. But if you're there and you're like, oh, that was worse, it ruined the next time we get an Alan Scott, solo book, will probably be another 70 years. It's just that never was going to end up selling that well anyway. But I think that Tim Sheridan is just an awful writer anyway. And it's not just that book. He ended up with that Teen Titans Academy nonsense. That was awful. What he did in his Shazam mini was god-awful. Like nothing he did in my mind ever was good. And every time I did talk to him at one point, once that he ended up where once that Alan Scott book came out, he like hunkered down. He dug his ditches and his things and started fighting with everybody. Because I was talking to him at one point, and me and him would have some discussions. He never was nice. He'd always he's one of those guys that whatever conversation, the road leads back to him. And so anything I would talk to him about, and like, oh man, like, did you know this with Shazam or whatever? He threw everybody under the bus. He was always a guy who just ended up, well, they didn't tell me that. And I'm like, well, you can kind of figure that out, right? Do you read anything? Because Shazam especially, like everything I asked him, hey, well, what's this with the Rock of Eternity here the last time we saw? And I'm not a guy who's like that nerd guy at a convention saying, well, actually, when this happened, that happened. These were blatant mistakes. And every time I asked him whatever, it was always somebody. Oh, the editors told me not to do that. Oh, they didn't tell me that was a thing. Oh, my God, this and that, whatever. And so I ended up where I was like, I don't know about this guy. And then I didn't like the first issue or 2 issues on the podcast of the Alan Scott Green Lantern, but I kept saying the reason I don't like it is I'm not getting the idea of having anybody understand this Green Lantern. You're not really giving us a lot of that. And also some of the things that happened, like Alan Scott just seemed like the biggest dummy who ever lived. The way that he was duped and giving up military secrets and things like that, it just didn't play out well. And he ended up on Twitter. Me and him got in a big fight on Twitter. And I just like everything that he was saying was just bullcrap and yelling. And he tried to make everybody like, if you don't buy this, then you're a hater. And the people who review it, it became a book that if you reviewed it and gave it a bad score, he would just right away yell that you're homophobic. And no, I'm bad writophobic is what I am. I hate bad writing. And he is a bad writer. And lo and behold, he ain't around that much now. So that's what happens. Eventually it works out. Eventually the bad writers disappear. But again, that's with the Earth 2 stuff. But with the New 52, Joden LaFlame says Superboy New 52 was his guilty pleasure. Hated the suit though. Funny thing was we had our site and we were doing reviews and there were some, big book Batman. Scott Snyder on Batman, you had Jeff Johns with Justice League and Aquaman, all that. But the books that ended up making us actually get some traction and actually do well was Superboy, Teen Titans, World's Finest. Like all these books that Eric picked that were nonsense, you ended up where those were the ones. And I think it's because nobody was reviewing them or they were reviewing. But back in the day, around 2013, if you go back to the comic book roundup, you rarely get a 10. The funny thing, I wish that the roundup was around a lot more because when you end up where you look at big events even in, the 2010s and earlier even. They only go back, I think the roundup only goes back to like 2007 or so, something like that. But you look at big events that people are like, that was the greatest thing I ever read. And you'll see 8 reviews and there's like one 9.2. No 10s, there's some 6s, some 7s. And when you read the actual reviews, you actually would get some criticisms that were legit. Maybe you didn't agree with them, but what you would end up getting, though, was actually thought out reviews that were very long and would spell out some things. And that's where I love reviews. I tell you, the amount I love comics, I love reviews more. I will read a review of anything. And I love it. I've always loved it. I loved, what's it called? Siskel and Ebert movie reviews, but even just regular random reviews. I would always read everything going on, especially back in the day, video games, stuff like that. So when we did this site, I was more into reviews. But even when we started doing our reviews with the New 52, we said, you can't just say, this book's awesome. Wow, it changed my life. 10 out of 10. And people weren't doing that. It was a lot more critical, but not in the way that I think it was haters. But then things shifted. And I'll tell you, I think I stopped doing written reviews a couple of years ago. Gabe the other day on the podcast tried to say that he had more written reviews than me. I haven't done one in like 3 years. He's not close. But the idea, I think that my reviews stayed consistent. Actually, I think I got a little more positive once I realized the lay of the land and things like that. But in the meantime, kind of consistent. And yet at one point when we first started, we were looked at as being too positive. Then all of a sudden it became that we were haters and we must hate everything. And then it became that kind of, okay, well, they're kind of in the middle and honest. Then it became haters again, but none of the scores ever really changed. It ended up being really wacky. And I'll tell you, I think, including the Marvel, have about 3,000, maybe 3,500 written reviews, something like that. And my overall average is a 7.2. I think that's a pretty good average. I think that that's actually a pretty positive average with that many reviews. Now I see there's some that have 3,000 reviews and their average is a 9.3, which leads me to laugh at some points to say when somebody gives something a 9, that person gives a 9. I'm like, oh man, I give them their thing. Oh man, like that's below average to you. That sucks, man. It must really stink. And then they get mad. I actually, and I shouldn't be proud of this, but I actually had 2 legit sites shut down their comment section, not because I was a troll, but because I would ask them questions. This one in particular, I'm not going to say who it is, but I'm not even going to say who it rhymes with. But I would just I'd want to talk about the issues, and they're like, "Man, that was awesome." And then I'd say, "Like, really? Like, why'd you think that?" And they got so sick of me. I think because I love reviews. And if anybody here did reviews from like 2013 to about 2020, I definitely know who you are, at least by name, and know what site, whatever. I used to like really deal. And there's Yule says 7's pretty solid. I think it is too. I think that that's a really good average score for, comics and what they come out with, especially because a lot of the review, sometimes a book's terrible and you don't review it. Usually you're reviewing things that you actually really like. And J.K. said the highest rating he's ever given is an 8.5. I've given a couple 10s. And I said that to me a 10 is a personal thing, and the idea of Brandon's making rhymes, it was not that. No, you can keep going with the rhymes. But the deal, I gave a 10 to the Rebirth special, the Jeff Johns Rebirth special, because legit, I'm a grown man. It made me tear up. And I thought, if something makes me cry, because I have no feelings whatsoever, must be something there. But I don't think I gave a 10 in the New 52 of regular books. There was some digital stuff that I might have liked or whatnot. But yeah. Again, I always get off the topic. But the idea of, the New 52, again, I'd love to hear what people's books and what they liked and what they hated. Yeah, and I'm going to go through some of these comments. Enzo214 said, Justice League 3000 was a unique take. I actually really liked Justice League 3000. Then they came back later, and I don't know, but when Gal Gardner showed up, I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. I thought it was cool. It just never developed. It never ended up where you got that cool ending of what was going on. But I actually really did like that. That was a little later. Common Sense says Kyle Higgins started his comics career with New 52 Nightwing. I love Nightwing, and Kyle Higgins is the reason why Nightwing, and then basically my favorite character is Dick Grayson of all iterations. But Nightwing is kind of my favorite character because of that. And one of the things that really got me into him as well was he had an interview on Fat Man on Batman with Kevin Smith, and it was a really good interview, and he was talking a lot about digital stuff, and he was going with the what's it called, Batman Beyond 2.0, I believe it was at that point, and that was really good. I got into digital because of that too, but he was talking about the way that digital, how it plays out and how the format works, that every page can be a cliffhanger. You can end up, instead of having every 2 page, and he worked that play, but a lot of things that I listened to on that really got me going. JK says he prefers digital, but buy paper to support shop. Kiddo likes the floppies. And yeah, I like digital as well, but I also read a lot of stuff like after midnight, like the Eric Clapton song. I end up reading late at night, and my wife would yell at me if I would put on a light or whatever. I don't have the best sight. And so having it on digital where I can zoom in and things like that, though I'll tell you, I never liked the guided view. It's weird how I'll describe it, but if you agree, it's claustrophobic to me. I don't like not seeing at least the whole page. When we do reviews, I have the digital, obviously, and I end up having 2 pages because I want to see, because I've already read it, but I want to see, oh yeah, that happens next, and kind of guides the way through. JK says, okay, now I enjoy that terrible World's Finest. It is, there is an issue in that, though, that me and Eric both love, is when Damien was going to meet Huntress, and it was a really, really cool idea of really going on with that. And then Brandon says, Batman and Robin a Turtle will always hold a special place in my heart. Those reviews, chef's kiss, that was rough. Batman and Robin a Turtle. And when you have a podcast and you try to do every book, which at one point we did, and that led to 13-hour podcast each week. But when we had to do Batman and Robin Eternal each and every week, it was driving me nuts. And boy, I remember, and Brandon, you'll remember the one issue that me and Brandon laughed so much about, that we would talk about for years, was the one where Bane was in it and he was skipping to my Lou. Bane is running away, but he's like clicking his heels in the deal. And also there's that same issue, or one of them, where they use the bat shark repellent in the way that I'm like, these hacks, whoever wrote this is a hack. They have no idea what they're talking about. They're trying to get people in with this nonsense. It was Lansing and Kelly. It was the worst. I remember at that point, and that was way back, and I'm like, Lansing and Kelly stink. They are the worst. And maybe I was right way back when. Some of the Batman and Robin Eternal, it started out decent, and when James Tynan actually did the issues, you're like, okay. And it kind of was a point where he'd do 2 issues, and then you'd have a couple other bullcrap issues, and then he'd come back and get you fired up again. And then eventually I'm like, this is the worst story. So bad. At one point you end up having this crazy deal where there's this signal going out, and it's supposed to affect children. And I kept saying all along, how old? Where do you get this children? What makes a child? What years? What are you going? Is it up to teen? Is it whatever? And then suddenly people were affected that shouldn't have been, and then it all went. And then at one point there was a part where Midnighter's making doors, but we were told he couldn't make the doors in Paris, but then he was. I don't know the whole thing. Oh wait. That was crazy. But I'm still looking at the thing here. Oh, the Brandon. I think I could just talk about that Batman and Robin. Now, Batman and Robin Eternal, and the other part where when we were reviewing it on the podcast, is what got us the original time we got the DC review copies. because the guy who still is one of the guys in charge of it, he actually got a hold of me. I gave the one issue, it might have been that Lansing and Kelly one, I gave it like a 2. And I was so mad, and I had a written review, and we talked about it on the podcast. Podcast, I just go nuts. But the review, I ended up cursing in it and saying, this is complete. And he got a hold of me and said, hey, I really liked your review. I'm like, really? That one? The 2 out of 10? He's like, oh, yeah, nobody curses in reviews. That's hilarious. And you made jokes and whatever. Would you like the review copies? And I'm like, oh, yeah, that'd be cool. And so it was weird later that we got him taken away for being not positive enough, but nowhere near a 2. Also, he ended up at one point, another thing that I got sent, I end up somewhere in the basement here. I have Batman and Robin Eternal, a bunch of the trades signed by Lansing and Kelly signed. Like, he got these and sent them to me, this PR guy. It was pretty cool. I hated it. And they all signed it, Tynan signed it. It was pretty neat. But yeah, and then Tom King. But yeah, so you have the New 52 Kid Eternities and exist post Infinite Frontier, says Common Sense. Bane lost all his masculinity. Twinkle Toes Bane was so hilarious. Yeah, and then Futures End. And that's the thing, and then World's End. It got crazy. At one point, I think that every issue or every episode of our podcast ended up where we had to talk about those 3 books every week. Oh my goodness, great. Oh, it was tough. And then having a podcast, you get thrown in so many directions, because then near the end of the New 52 into the DCYOU that not a lot of people even realize was Convergence. So we had to do those, and I was excited for it. But again, with the New 52, some of the other books, and I'm looking at still some of the what's it called? Some of the comments here. And you end up where Brandon was saying about, and him and Common Sense talking about the Jim Gordon being Batman. That's more of that after Convergence, DCYOU. Yule says Batman #4 was damn good. Guess what, Yule? That's my other 10 out of 10. And I hate to admit it, because if this is, and I'm talking Rebirth deal, actually. Batman 4, but Batman #4 in Rebirth with Tom King, I think it was 4 or 5. I gave another, I think that was my last 10. That's like a stain on my career. Then one of my last 10 out of 10s I gave to Tom King. But I really like Scott Snyder's Batman. I didn't love Mr. Bloom. Brandon said that. And I'm looking too, and Blood Squad 7 #8 comes out next week. So there, you'll giving a shout out. And yeah, JK says 10 to me means perfect, not one flaw. To me, again, there were a couple things, and I don't give out 10s. And in fact, Eric, who just recently quit the podcast, his whole thing was, if I ever give a 10, I quit. I'll never do anything again. He never got to that point, but he almost did. But the whole play of it is he said that to him, a 10 is a perfect comic you're never going to get past. You'll never get past that. So why even try? But Common Sense actually has a super chat. You should talk to Scott Brian Wilson about his Alan Scott story, Green Lantern, The Birth of Conspiracy. I bet it would be great. What could have been? There's a lot of things like that. I end up where it's been talked about a bunch, but right now, Jeremy Adams has a Wonder Woman story that he says is kick-ass. He says it's great, and I trust him. I think he's great, but they wouldn't listen to his pitch. And again, there's a lot of times now that they don't take pitches for things. They assign books, and that's not always the greatest. That's usually going to end up making bad things. Not bad things, but people who aren't inspired. Matt Fisher says, I review for Impulse's Gamer. The only one that I have completely lost my mind on was the final 2 issues of Krakoa. I had to actually go back and edit some language because it was spicy. One of the best things, again, and we started our own thing. We started our own site. And the best part of that was that nobody could really yell at us. Right. So when we would say things, if somebody would get offended, there'd be nobody for them to go to and yell. Plus, we never, ever had ads on the site, nothing like that. It was just, we just wanted to have a site. We would tell people it's not a fan site, it's a review site. We always said there was a difference, but not having not having the idea of, having to kowtow to anything. It was pretty cool, and people would get mad at us. And Common Sense said, "Did anyone read Telos's comic?" We reviewed it. You could go back and listen to the podcast where we talk about that nonsense, that whole Telos thing. And he's a planet, but he's also Telos. And oh my God, it's what's his name, Auric, the what's it? I can't, the Thunder. I can't even remember. The whole play was funny. One of the things where Telos was going to reveal who he was, and Eric was reading the book. That was a book he was reviewing. And as he's reading it, he's like one page before the reveal. Eric thinks he realizes who it is, does about an hour worth of research to then realize that the next page he said he's Auric. So that was crazy. Also, we worked with a guy at that point with the name Auric, which was weird. That's the crazy name. But yeah, Common Sense says, does anybody remember Pandora? Again, when we did our New 52 review podcast, one of the things was to point out where Pandora was hiding out in all those first issues. That was a pretty crazy deal. But this person says, I don't understand how you hear a guy like Jeremy Adams say, hey, I have a story I really like for Wonder Woman, the notorious low seller for the Trinity, and not jump on the opportunity to publish it. I think it was because he pitched it before. I mean, they weren't even sure. That was when he thought he was out of comics. At that point, when he lost Flash, he talked to me and said he didn't think he had anything going on. He was done, and he was just going to go back to animation stuff. I think that eventually we may see his Wonder Woman stuff. Luckily, one of the things is, again, when I say somebody like Tim Sheridan, who was kind of best friends with Jeremy Adams, eventually it takes some time, but eventually, the cream rises a bit. You get rid of the deal. We were at a point, though, where sometimes these bad writers, they kind of stayed around for reasons, and you just have to wait. You just have to wait, and eventually you end up, kind of, getting the better. And thank God, finally, Jeremy Adams ended up being able to kind of be elevated to the point now, because he really deserves it. And really, in my mind, is one of the things is he does some fun stuff. Now, again, we can go back to that. Like, there's a segue to the New 52, because a lot of people thought the New 52 was too dark. It ended up being that dark deal. I've even had some people say that it was a shame they just didn't make that, almost like an absolute universe or an ultimate universe at that point. I have some people who tell me that that's what they think of it as right now, even though you still have a lot of the continuity. But yeah, Enzo 214 says Red Lantern Guy Gardner was cool. I like that. See, again, in the New 52, whether or not you liked it overall, some people don't like it. And it's weird, because some people will yell about not having enough variety, but then they won't mention that when you get the New 52. Now, there were some wacko books. Like, I don't know that Yule sold a lot of Blackhawks back in the day. I guess I would guess that he didn't. Or, were a lot of people coming and getting Voodoo, even though those covers were sexy as hell. But some of the things were cool just to have them. Some of the things of just having the option of these books. And in the end, obviously, some things started getting canceled, which normally would, some sooner than others. But overall, like, some people didn't like the dark deal of it. You had the Joker with his face off. You have all that stuff going on. But then you have other things, like we said about Alan Scott in the Earth 2 book being gay and not having his kids, and having Batgirl not in the wheelchair anymore. And a lot of things like that people ended up kind of being upset about, because they like Oracle. And you kind of, and some of the things, I'd say Batgirl is a good example of them still trying to figure out stuff. I mean, she had that chip at the one point, but then they're like, well, that chip's going to get a little wonky. Or the Joker's going to attack her again and hurt the chip. Then the chip the chip isn't mentioned much anymore, but she's always now, she is kind of Oracle now. And, even Batman calls her, but more of a coordinator of the Bat family right now. But it doesn't have that zing that it did. But some of the other books, going with some of the misses, the Superman books were garbage. They were really bad. When I first started, I was not a fan. Like, from my initial reading, because of the New 52, not a Grant Morrison fan. I am now because I've actually read, other things and actually like a lot of his things. I know that a lot of people hate him, love him, whatnot. I really, really like him. But boy, that Action Comics, I remember getting the first trade and reading it and not even understanding why, not even just what was going on, but what the hell would you write? Like the story just didn't work for me. And then you go and read Superman, which was also a wreck in my mind, also changed hands a million times. But the behind the scenes, Grant Morrison wasn't telling the Superman writers what he was going to do. So it ended up being really poorly coordinated overall. But I did not like the Superman books. I actually did like the Superboy book, as I think it was JK said earlier, like as a guilty pleasure. I didn't love the Supergirl book at first, but I kind of got to like that. And some of the events, some of those Superman, they're not good. Like Hell on Earth, I think the one, and they had some Krypton Returns. I actually like those more than the actual just standard books before that. And Jaber actually said, did you like Superman Unlimited preview? I like New 52 Action Comics, all Green Lantern books, Aquaman, Animal Man, Swamp Thing, Lemire. Lemire Green Arrow was awesome. That was really good. That actually is one of my favorites of the whole New 52. Eric hated it, so I ended up reviewing it, but he didn't like it. But I loved it with the actual clans and everything like that. And yeah, Yule said Action had some moments, but very few. And I like Forever Evil, except it screwed Nightwing and the Kyle Higgins book. That's the one thing that I was really getting into it. He'd gone to Chicago. And there was, I forget the girl's name. I wish I could remember, but that little girl that ended up realizing and figuring out that he was Nightwing. And I thought she was kind of cool. If you remember how you start Forever Evil and how Nightwing gets involved, he legit, what they said was he swung on zip lines from Chicago to Gotham with Zaz over his shoulder. It's very weird. Very odd. But yeah, Forever Evil, I think, might be the last really, really good event. I really like that. I like some of the others, but I really, really like that. But back to Jaber asked if I like the what's it called? Dan Slott's Superman Unlimited preview in the Free Comic Book Day issue. We do end up reviewing it. Again, I have to keep mentioning it so that you don't look for it other ways. But this week, because it's Annuals Week, it's a thing we've done for about 8 years now. Every time there's an Annuals Week, we have the show, the DC Comics Podcast, is Patreon only, try to get people involved going over there. But me and Gray ended up reviewing the whole issue, and yeah, I liked it. I actually liked it. I thought it was pretty good. You don't have any mention of global warming, which I thought that was a plus, but I did like it. I've seen the first issue. A guy that I know sent it to me. I haven't read it through. I'm a busy man, but I end up looking through, and I think by the end people are going to get a little upset, but I think it was pretty good. I'm looking forward to it. I am. Lane says, Lane's the one guy who bought the entire Voodoo series. We reviewed it. It was one of the later ones that we reviewed on the New 52 Review podcast, and we went through it. I'm like, whew, it was tough. I liked it, but then I was like, I don't know. It's like crazy. Oh my goodness gracious. But she's sexy as hell. I'm telling you, those covers. And when you start out and she's at the strip club working the pole at the club, whoo-wee. But yeah. And there you go. Jeremy Adams' brother-in-law is a customer at Yule's store. That's awesome. And I hope everybody, does still go to their store. And if you're in the California, Berkeley area, which I believe is Yule's area, you go see his deal. Yeah, so you end up in JK says he didn't get the name with Bruce, but he did take the R symbol. Tell Damian that we are Robin again. The whole run didn't work for me as I didn't believe Alfred would be that close. So somebody must have asked him. There it is. The whole we are Robins. Poor Troy. Remember Troy? Shoulder pads, we used to call him. He died. He got killed. Alfred had blood on his hands. He did. Also, the idea of the We Are Robins, Alfred doing that behind the scenes is every time you read something, if it's a year one especially, there is Alfred. The only person who's more confused and disgusted by Bruce taking in kids is usually Jim Gordon. But both of them end up just like, they want to give lip service. Hey, what are you doing with the kid doing this? You know, and Batman says, hey, it's war and kids and whatever, and then they just give it up. But yeah, Alfred and that Weird Robins was weird. I liked that book a lot for the first bit. Once you got in the Robin War and when you ended up where they're fighting Talons, yeah, it got a little too over the top. And the idea that there was every kid there besides Damien didn't just get sliced and diced. I mean, it was kind of a cool concept. But at Troy, though, R.I.P. For the longest time, even I'm telling you, I probably mentioned Troy from Weird Robins probably like in the last 2 months on our podcast, 3 months. We always bring him up anytime they talk about a kid who shot. Pretty much when Red Canary was introduced and the girl was just somebody who was getting a guitar in a shop. She's at the music store, buys a guitar. Somebody tries to steal something and she conks him over the head like El Kabong. And then suddenly is a hero enough that she's like 2 feet away from doomsday and doesn't get killed. Ridiculous. I bought a couple guitars in my day. I ain't no hero. So you end up where you also, as I said, Jaber said, New 52 Action Comics, all Green Lantern books, Aquaman, Animal Man, Swamp Thing, and Lemire Green Arrow. I'll tell you, the one thing with the Green Lantern books, and I was reviewing Green Lantern Corps because I like Guy Gardner, and I think I was doing another one reviewing, and I had to give them all to Eric to review on our site. The thing that got me with the Green Lantern books and why I actually, until the podcast started and I started reading them again, there were a lot of events. There was a lot of events, a lot of books involved in those events, and I didn't have a lot of that history of the Green Lantern stuff. And again, it didn't really reboot. It kind of continued on and I liked it, but there was a lot going on. But the initial Green Lantern book I thought was cool. I liked the idea that Hal had kind of retired. I like when he comes back to Earth and he goes to his apartment. There's like 80 notices and things and he's like, shit, I got to get back to regular life. But the stuff with Sinestro, though it became a thing to kind of follow what ring and things and how, then he's making Pure Will. But the book that I really did like was New Guardians. I thought that I know the concept a lot of people didn't love. I loved it. I thought it was cool. I actually think in this fractured spectrum, we should have a new Guardians team going. And I'm not talking the New Guardians that ended up fighting Hemogoblin and Snowflame, though I wouldn't mind them either. We could get Tom back in. We saw him recently, not giving him bad, nicknames. But no, that New Guardians was so much fun. I thought it was cool. I liked the concept. And Common Sense said, Jim, did you cover Lucian Gates, aka New 52, by Jimmy Palmiotti? I do think Lucian has potential, and I agree New 52 offers more varieties than current DC. We did. I didn't really love it. But Jimmy Palmiotti, I thought that's another guy. I know that he rubs some people the wrong way. He gets political at points on his Twitter, stuff like that. I can always overlook that. And even if it is something that, I agree with or whatnot, I don't really engage in any of that stuff. But he's a very nice guy. If you actually have a question, again, I'll go back to Jeremy Adams as another guy like that. That if you have a question about something and you give, respectfully ask, even if you don't, I think Jimmy Palmiotti will still come back at you. He'll still come back at you and yell and whatever. But yeah, he's a real nice guy. I did a written interview with him for this thing I did 5 questions with. I've talked about this before. It's like 5 questions. We usually asked about 12. And also it involved 75% were comic stuff, but then mix in some other crazy stuff. And I remember Jimmy probably had the one thing, and our site, and it's called Weird Science. Me and Eric are really into 80s stuff. I grew up in the 80s, so a lot of the stuff that we would do would always have references to something 80s or whatnot. And I hate, to the nth degree, I hate the movie Breakfast Club. I can't stand it. I hate it. But one of the questions I asked him was, if you were one of the guys from Breakfast Club or girls, who would you be? And he gave me this long-ass answer about how much he hated the Breakfast Club and this and that. And I'm like, I don't like it either. It's just a question. It's just a question. But yeah, he ended up where he did. And Yule said Jimmy's love of gun comics ain't my style. That's one of the guys like that for me. Is Brian Azzarello. Usually, like his style of stuff, I'm not into it. Like kind of like the over, not even violent sexual stuff and whatever. I'm not really into. Though Batwang, cool, right? That Batwang stuff. Though again, New 52, I really liked Brian Azzarello's and Cliff Chang's Wonder Woman. I thought it was great. I thought it was such a cool take of things like the gods. I know that later people started, and it became a thing. And there was that time period that we all are pretty aware of where things started being looked at in a different way. And the idea of explaining how, you end up having kids or whatever, and they're like, well, the sailors kind of got used against their will by the Amazons. To me, it felt like, some ancient mythology. And if you read that, I love the idea that now, even in, I think it was the Clunrads, ancient, Greek mythology, Roman, whatever, it's sus as hell. That's what happened. I mean, that's their deal. It's what it is. I love people trying to cancel. I'm canceling Zeus. I'm going to cancel Homer. I'm like, really? Like, please. There's some things, like, I understand where I even get mad when people are like, oh man, I just watched this Seinfeld show and they did this and that. But the Greek mythology, all of a sudden you're like, you can't say anything bad about Medusa. Oh, Jesus. I ended up where, please. But in that book, I thought it was so good. I really liked it. I ended up reading it. I didn't even read it right away. We started the site because I said earlier, not many people were reviewing Wonder Woman. And then we started, and I didn't start reviewing Wonder Woman for a while. But when I did, I really, really liked it. Yeah. And Play-Doh. Now, you do mean the kids' toy that my kids used to eat, right? Yeah, that's the crazy Zeus and all the women that freak on Farm Animal. Oh, my God. Yeah, I'm telling you, if you really want to cancel Greek, like, you got to cancel. Everything is sus as hell. But that kind of makes it what it is. So, yeah, I'm looking at some of the other things. Lane said the new Guardians was good, but Kyle and Carol didn't ever work. Yeah, the funniest thing is that came up again in the Omega Men book by Tom King. Carol and Kyle, and it just always disappears. Always disappears. Fear Monarch says anytime Snowflame shows up is a good time. I love Snowflame. I actually have a parody song that I did when I was actually doing like me singing and all that nonsense and playing, but it was to Cocaine for Snowflame, which works out perfectly. And I thought that was the parody that worked on so many levels, mainly because Snowflame rhymes with cocaine and he does the cocaine. I even had clips in there by Rick James. Oh, it was one of the fun times that I've had. Snowflame's great. The worst New 52 title is 52 Blue Beetle. It is so mean-spirited towards Jaime. The only good happens to his grandma. And that's Common Sense said. That book was bad. I'm telling you, I'll ask Common Sense, who is very positive on a lot of things and ends up telling me all the time and gives me some crap sometimes. But I think that they need that. The last Blue Beetle book I didn't like because it just kind of like it didn't give me the feeling of, man, that Blue Beetle is cool. Like, man, and I kept saying, like, I just want that Blue Beetle book that starts out where I'm like, man, like it's the idea of, you'll believe a man can fly. I want to believe that I can get a scarab and be pretty kick-ass. But it just ends up where they don't do the things that make it cool because they get lost in things and really have problems. But going back to some other things, yeah, Common Sense said R.I.P. Troy. Oh, poor Troy. Lane actually brings up, it went the wrong direction after the Super Doom story filled up like 6 issues of it. I believe, was it Tim Seeley? Who was it who did the Super Doom? I can't remember who it was now. Boy, they were mad at me because that first issue of that Super Doom nonsense. Though I'll tell you too, one of the side plays of the New 52, nobody remembers. I know Common Sense will, and I'm thinking Lane will too, but the book Doomed, where you had the character that I really wanted that character to succeed. I really wanted him to. And when we were reviewing it, it became a book that I liked, even though I knew it wasn't good. I have then went back and read it. It was not good at all. But I don't know. I have a soft spot for that. And yeah, the Common Sense said the New 52 did not hold back on drawing the sexy ladies, which was, and Common Sense said I should reread the New 52 Wildstorm comics. I remember Voodoo was good, but also confusing because there's two Voodoos, one original and a clone. That was crazy. Yeah, some of the Wildstorm stuff just never seemed to really hit very well, but it was interesting enough. Again, I read them not even knowing Wildstorm. I'm just like, I'm in. I'll do that, whatever. Who Dat Nation 12 said, I love Death of the Family, but I can see the too dark point. At the time, Faceless Joker was so over in my area that we just ate all that up in the comics. It was, I thought it was cool. Death of the Family, if you remember, they had that one point, and they had the WTF, the F comic covers. I think it was for issues 19 or 20. It was kind of, I think, right before Villains Month. And they ended up where the one was Jason Todd. They were legit going to have Jason Todd put on his mask at one point. It was going to have acid in it and burn the shit out of his face. And they didn't quite go that route. Remember the scene where they were all like at the dinner table? That was wacky. It was pretty good. I remember that was when I read that and going into it again, going with how I ended up starting around that issue 13 is when I actually read everything up to that and started reading the things. That was one of the first events that I ended up reading, and I liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. Court of the Owls, I liked that as well. But yeah, the whole thing, Dick Grayson and that Court of the Owls stuff, and tying it in, though, the Gray Sun and stuff, they couldn't let that go for a while. That kept popping up. I'm looking at the deal here. But yeah, Dick, that's the problem, though. When Forever Evil did come out, it did kind of put a kibosh on the Nightwing book, though I did think it was the clever deal of, stopping his heart, and then he actually died, so that gets that kill switch off, but it was a shame. Who Dat Nation 12 says New 52 might be the last time Red Hood got some respect. After that, they just repeat the same story. Beats every new writer that jumps in the book. It is. And I'll tell you, there are characters like that all the time. Jason is now, I think, the worst. Damian was like that as well. Now Jason older than Damian, obviously, but for a while, Jason would show up, be pissed off, yell about crowbars, yell, go. Damian would show up, he'd be a dick, he'd yell. Though one of the best moments ever is, I forget what book it was, but Damian's there, and it might have just been in Red Hood in one of the events, but you end up having Jason and Arsenal show up. And Damian says something to Arsenal like, "Oh, what are you, trucker hat guy?" It's so funny. Made me laugh so much. But yeah, Jason, though, that book did go, give him a little different. He had some enemies going on. The whole thing with Starfire, that love triangle or bang triangle it was at that point, was pretty cool. But I actually did like the deal with Jason. There's that one. Was it Jason? I guess it was Jason, but it was also Arsenal. But the one cover and the one issue, I think it was Tynan, where he has like 8 million guns strapped to his back. I'm like, oh my. One of the big things that we kept saying throughout with Jason, and the way that I can say, okay, they're going to respect Jason from now on. They showed that stupid portrait that they had made, Bruce had made, the family portrait, and Jason's not on it. And it kills me to this day. You have Barbara on it. Barbara's on it, but Jason wasn't. So on the pod, this comes up so much on the podcast of when I have actual songs about it. The idea of Jason, I said at one point, Duke is going to be on that portrait before Jason. I'm like, come on, you treat him like shit. Anytime you go and they'll be like, oh, we're having this family get together, you flip a coin to see if Jason's going to even be mentioned, let alone there. And it's nonsense. It's nonsense. Anytime you want to have an event or anything that somebody goes against Batman, say a Gotham War. Jason. He's like, yeah, I think that she has some good ideas. Though, again, Dick Grayson agreed too. That was awful. But the whole play of that is Jason just, oh my God. Yeah, yeah, and Joker neutered Two-Face Death of the Family. It was so dark, that deal. And I'm looking, one of the big misplays though, and I have been told by my man Scott Snyder over and over again, he will defend this in a way of not defending it, but that reboot deal of of what's it called, Mr. Freeze, was so bad. And he has been running from that ever since. He's tried to retcon it back. He does these things. He's recently done his version of Mr. Freeze in the Absolute Universe. But that play that Victor never really did know Nora, but became obsessed, nobody liked that. It was really bad. And when I talked to him, though, legit, he said, and I'm sure people have heard of this already, but he said, we were told that we had to come up with new origins for all these things. I thought it might be pretty cool. But yeah, some of the things are crazy. Oh, and Lane said that he sent me some pictures. I gotta look. I haven't checked my email in like a week. I gotta do that. All of a sudden, I'm gonna find out a bunch of crazy crap is going on. Common sense that I don't like how Cheetah is basically Julia Capitelis. Seriously, Cheetah shouldn't be a sympathetic character. It should have been Vanessa. That's true. And again, some of the things dark, but then you did end up having that whole phase of every villain was a friend we haven't met yet. I've laughed about that even on the aficionados, but having some of the new things going, you get the idea of some of them. I know people hate Harley as a good character. I've talked about this before. I kind of like her as an in-between, somebody who wants to do good but just can't, always messes it up. But you do that to kind of be able to do more things with her. I get it. It's just not even the greatest deal. Yeah, common sense. I'm saying if we go back to the first Jaime Reyes comic series, I mean, I'm talking for people now. We're way beyond that. I'm talking when you end up having, an All In or a Dawn of DC, and you're trying to get new writers or readers in, you want to get kids in and whatever, make Jaime cool, make it fun. You still have some big things. And yeah, you're going to always deal with the reach and things like that. But I just think that everybody ends up where they start some of these characters. First off, we're talking about Jason, talk about Jaime, talk about all this. When people end up starting up a new character, not a new character, but they start a book, they usually only read the last trade of what was done. And then they go from there, and it perpetuates this nonsense that keeps going on. It goes with the fact that, again, I don't know that anybody out there is listening, or DC is listening to a guy who says, I have the best Jason Todd story. I am a lifelong Jason Todd fan. I think he's been treated like shit. I have a way, because I know the continuity. I know exactly the ins and outs, and I have a way here that I could do that works within everything that gets Jason not redeemed, but makes him a better character, not this rehash shit all the time. And again, that's where DC's blamed a lot for rebooting all the time. They're more should be blamed for rehashing their nonsense. And the nonsense is that stuff. The nonsense is Jason Todd. I said Damian just never could evolve because people were just, I even think that most of the people who wrote Damian for a while until really Joshua Williamson was one of the better, and no, I'm wrong, Tomasi in the Batman and Robin. He actually treated his, Damian's conflict and stuff like that, like with as a reality and with respect, and showing that, why would a kid be so bratty and so over the top? And there's reasons, and he showed the reasons. And then when you end up having him die because Grant Morrison wanted to kill him in Batman Inc., again, I shed a tear because I love Damian. And I think that a lot of that stuff and that silent issue by Tomasi was great. But then remember when they did, again, New 52, remember when they did the Batman and Aquaman, because there was no Batman and Robin, so it had to be Batman going. And legit, remember the deal with Jason Todd where Batman goes and he's just threatening Jason about how he came back and this and that, and showing him things and really making Jason just go through flashbacks and all these things because he wants to know that it didn't treat Jason very well. But yeah, that Batman and Catwoman, I think Batman and Catwoman of that, I think might have been one of the first reviews. Maybe not. Maybe it was before that. But whenever that was around 2013, was one of the first things. I think the first book I ever reviewed was Batman 66 #1, which I liked. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, Tomasi's Damien was great. J.K. says it was. And then you kind of revert back, and then you finally get Joshua Williamson, who shows up, and Joshua Williamson, to me, is a better character guy than some of his plotting, but he did a really good job. And now I think Philip Kennedy Johnson is doing a really good job as well. And so that's what happens. You end up, yes, that's the deal, crying over Damien. I was so upset. I ended up, though I tell the story, which is one of the funniest things I've ever heard ever. That book came out. Me and Eric were at work, and the books would drop at, I think it was like noon is when they would kind of drop or whatever. So I'm waiting for lunch, or maybe it was just because it was our lunch. So I download the book. I buy it and download it. I'm reading it on my phone, but I'm reading it and I'm like, oh my God. So I said, and Eric's like, I said, I don't want to spoil it. And we knew up till then it was already, Grant Morrison came out and like, yep, I'm going to kill him. So it was like more of how it happened and whatnot. But I was like, oh my God, it happened. And then Eric's like, oh crap. So Eric gets my phone and reads it. So then his girlfriend picks him up after work. And he's all bummed out. I mean, I'm telling you, the rest of the day, me and Eric were bummed. And we ended up where Eric, he gets in the car and his girlfriend kind of goes like, okay, yeah, I think something's going on here. And says, what's wrong? Why do you seem so sad? And then Eric, in the weirdest way, because his girlfriend doesn't really come, he goes, didn't you hear? Damien's dead. So she looks at him and almost crashed her car. And then she pulled over and was hyperventilating and crying because their best friend's name was Damien, and Eric didn't tell him that's who. She thought their best friend Damien died. The guy just got married and had a kid. And Eric never thought the idea that he should say, in the comics, Damien, and not even Damian Wayne, nothing. He ends up where Damien's dead. And she legit, he said, they almost rolled the car because she kind of swerved at one point and then was like getting dizzy. Oh, so good. He told me that the next day. I'm like, really? Like, you didn't tell her any other. He's like, I fucking forgot. Oh, so yeah. It makes me laugh still. But yeah, the moment that I always talk about was when it was right before, and Damien and Dick Grayson are there, Nightwing's there, and like, hey, we were the best Batman and Robin. And it really got me. And then Damien goes and gets run through. And then you have where, even when he's like, mother, call him off. And then he gets, run through. And the part is, too, they did a really good, was it Chris Burnham still? They did a pretty good job. You want to show Damien's just a little kid. When the heretic runs him through with that huge sword, he picks him up, and there he is dangling in the air. And then at that one point, you have Talia watching, and then she goes off, and you see her, she sheds a tear. And then the one person's like, are you okay? And then she like wipes the tear off and says, I get a moment, of feelings, but I'm done. That was my second of feelings. I'm done. Let's go. And I was like, oh man, you bitch. I've hated Talia since, though I like her because I hate her. And I wish we'd get a little more of her. Once you ended up Tom King with that stupid Batcat shit, that kind of got pushed aside. And then one of the biggest moments lately, still years ago, but when Catwoman goes in and sword fights, she picks up a sword for the first time and beats Talia. Really? Really? Is that what you're going to tell me? Also defeats freaking Flashes at one day? Nonsense. And I love Catwoman, but yeah, I'm telling you that when when Eric said that, when he told me the next day, because he's telling me the story just like he's telling me. I didn't really know or remember that he had a friend named Damien either. I'm like, man, was just like reading shit on the side or whatever. Was it because it's a kid and it reminded her of something? Nope, they're best friend. Just had a kid. Oh, it's the best. Matt Fisher says, what would Bendis have done in the New 52? Well, it does have a different time frame. He would suck. Actually, you ask that, and the funny response would be ruin things. But everybody thinks things got ruined anyway. And I don't know. Maybe he would have been better suited then than in Rebirth. Because Rebirth was we're apologizing for that shit, and we're going to make things better. And then in comes Bendis, who I think was, case in point of the idea of, I don't need to know shit. I'll just make up my own stuff and do my own. Like that, in my mind, Bendis, that's what he does a lot. I wasn't aware of it because at the point I wasn't reading a lot of Marvel comics. But Brandon, if he's still around, Brandon hated Bendis for so long. And Nick Spencer really didn't like him either. But Bendis was the idea where Brandon told me at one point, way back before he was at DC, said, Bendis is the worst, where he writes a book and then he needs 5 writers to make things right afterwards. Tom King, same deal. How many books and series, minis, whatever, did we get out of the Heroes in Crisis? Trying to fix both Wally, but also Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy still is wacky and still is just getting over that now, and it was so long ago. But Bendis would probably have went into the New 52 and would have done his own thing. It would have fit better in the New 52, but it would have been probably bullshit and nobody would have liked it, and then it would have just been retconned by the next writers or whatever. But I do think that he might have been better served as a reboot in that than a guy coming in and a rebirth that was supposed to be and was pretty exciting. And when people talk to me about, oh man, what was the best thing that you ever dealt with or whatever, I don't just go by the quality of books either. I'm going by people were fired up. We would end up where we would put out a review, and not even just the views, but there would be 30 to 100 comments on each thing. People were excited. People were going on and on. We ended up where one of the reasons why we had a 13-hour podcast at one point was because we legit would have 5 mail sections. We couldn't do it all in one section because each section would have 4 emails that would take like an hour. And people were so fired up to talk about stuff and whatnot. Again, that might be the best thing. The New 52, without the New 52, we didn't get Rebirth. But then they ruined that. And they seem to always do that. And it's just the weird play in the scheme of things. One of the things, and maybe we'll talk about it next week, but is the idea of what editors do at both DC and Marvel. I'm a dummy, so I don't know everything, but from what I've been told by talking to people, say, people that I've mentioned even today, Jimmy Palmiotti or Jeremy Adams and even Scott Snyder, things like that, mostly at DC. When I talk to people at Marvel, it's funny, Marvel, I don't have a lot of writers or artists that really talk to me, but I have 2 assistant editors that talk to me and give me a lot of shit that I'm not allowed to tell people. But when you say, and that's the thing Fear Monarch says, talking about editors, a whole lot of nothing. The problem is there's 2 separate plays that go on. I was just thinking of this the other day, and it actually came up during the aficionados talk yesterday. And I can't remember. It might be somebody here who ended up talking about the editors, because if you do think about it, the biggest complaint at Marvel is the editors are too involved. They end up where you have a Nick Lowe who, he's so involved that the guy thinks he's hilarious, and every editor's note wanted me to punch somebody when I read that Spider-Man Godzilla. But in the meantime, you don't sit there and say, oh my God, everything's going to be fine because Joe Kelly's on Amazing Spider-Man. Most people say it's never going to get better until Nick Lowe leaves. You don't really have that as much at DC, because DC's the opposite. You have somebody like Leah Williams who actually had a tweet, who basically, the tweet was, hey, all my Marvel, co-writers and friends, go over to DC. They don't give a shit about anything. And that was basically the deal, where they're like, editors, the biggest, you have Leah Williams, who you could say whatever. The funny thing, I actually think she's a nice person, and I think she's very interesting when she talks of things, but when she writes an issue, I think she loses her mind and doesn't know what's going on and does not have anybody to reel her in, because her stuff at Marvel was bad. Her stuff at DC is god-awful, because she said that when she got on with Power Girl, they're like, hey, we want you to write Power Girl. She's like, okay, I can see why. But you end up where she says, I went back, and I never thought of the idea that Leah Williams was somebody who would do the due diligence and read everything of that character. She might be lying. I don't think she is. She said, I went back and I looked and I asked people, I looked up things, and what are the best things, what's going on? And she legit had a whole thing she spelled out of, I got to a point where things changed. There's this, and again, you do have, say, Earth 2 deal, you have the deal, so there's that point, and it's legit. She said, I got to this place where you could veer off in 5 directions. I did not know what they wanted me to do. I didn't know which direction I should take. She said she went to the editors and said, I'm at this point where I don't know where to go. Should I be this? Karen Starr? Should I do this? Would it be that? And they actually, she said, they looked at me and said, why are you bothering with any of that? Just tell your own funny story. That was the editors telling her not to care about anything about what came before with the character. So again, Leah Williams, not great. And again, you want to know who else? There's two people. There's a couple people. And I do end up, I'm not exactly a nice person. I don't know if that comes across sometimes. Sometimes I'm kind of a dick. So when I meet somebody who's legitimately like a nice person, it really amazes. I don't know why it amazes me. It's a sign of the times. It is. It really amazes, and I'll support that person, even though I have to keep saying their work stinks. But I support him as a nice person. But Steve Orlando is one of the nicest guys I've ever talked to. I mean, legit, one of the nicest guys. Not a great writer. Gets lost in a lot of things and whatnot, but a really nice person. But then again, Jeremy Adams is one of the nicest persons I've ever met as well, and he's a good writer. It's just that's what happens. You can be a nice person and still write better. I just think maybe dicks are better writers. I don't know. I'm trying to think some other nice people. Jimmy Palmiotti, I think, is nice. I do think that there was somebody Teenie Howard is very, very nice. I just don't think she can write very well. That Catwoman that she wrote is one of the funniest things I've ever read. Since Ann Nocenti, a classic, but had lost her way. Ann Nocenti's New 52 books were some of the funniest things I've ever read, and they were not comedy. They were the funniest things, and it hurt. Because she is a all-time great. Not that New 52 Catwoman. If you know Josh McDonald from the Aficionados and his pop podcast, he was writing for Batman News, and me and him actually became friends because of Ann Nocenti's awful books, and people were giving him like 8s and 9s, and then at the bottom it was Josh McDonald, Batman News 2, Jim Warner Weird Science 1.5. They were so bad, but some of the people are really nice. They just can't write. I don't know where we go. Oh, Leah Williams with the editors. She legit said that. Like, she actually did the work. And if you read that Power Girl, and again, sometimes when people end up yelling and screaming, I do end up having to mention, there'll be a lot of people who say things suck. But listen to them, and hopefully you'll realize if they have actually read it or not. And that's why I like reviews, and I don't have a lot of those videos of, oh my God, this and that, and me yelling and screaming or whatever. I'll yell and scream in a review, but I'm in the issue and I'm doing my, work, reading and reviewing the issue. So by the end, I can say, hey, this book wasn't good. This book was great. But when I do, I'm saying it because I read every single issue. I'll never get on and start yelling about something I haven't read, or I won't get on and say at the end, like instead of doing, reviews or whatnot, get at the end just to come in with that last thing. They ruined this or whatever, because I've heard a lot of people who I like end up yelling about some stuff and they have never read it. And I know they haven't read it and they've admitted they've never read it. They're just there for the clicks. And I don't play the game right. Yeah. And there you go. You have Fear Mark. I'll yell and scream when we get to the King book. Yeah. Well, there you go. But I'll read them. If somebody starts telling me, if you end up asking me, oh man, that Rorschach book was awful, I'll tell you right away. I read one issue and I bailed. I did not read it, but I've read a lot of the other stuff that I didn't like. Again, it's a side thing. Common Sense says Teenie Howard did bring back Aiko as Catwoman. The lady that Selena kiss and give her Catwoman mantle. I loved Aiko, and I'm telling you, at the beginning of Teenie Howard's run, she definitely was grabbing a lot of Genevieve Valentine stuff that was right before Rebirth, which I really liked. I'm a Catwoman fan. I really like some of my favorite characters at DC are Catwoman. Again, if we go back to the New 52, it was okay. The beginning was a little rough, but I didn't mind that. I do like Harley. I know that that's something that people don't like to admit. And I did like the Jimmy Palmiotti, Amanda Connor Harley for a while. I think that they kind of got caught up in the idea of, hey, we'll get rid of the Joker to the point where it became like a personal deal. but I still like that. I even like the Gang of Harley stuff, if people remember that. Again, at one point, that's the best thing. And when I talk to people about Harley Quinn, and when you talk about, well, I only like her with the Joker and things like that, legit, when they came out with that book, that was a goofy book. I mean, it was in its own weird Harley continuity as well. You had her, in New York and doing the things, but you had like some really cool cast of characters, including a little version of Danzig, if you remember that. The book was so big that at one point for a while, and you might remember, it was coming out twice a month. Like, that's how big it was. And I don't know, some people say to me now, well, it never sold. It was just that they pushed it. But at one point it was big. And I am, as a full out Harley fan, I said it over and over. I really said it when Punchline came out, where people were really like, it wasn't that they liked Punchline, it was that they hated Harley. And I said at that point, common sense just said, who do you like better, Joker's daughter or Punchline? And the funny thing, I liked Dula at the beginning when she was everybody's daughter. Like the wind would blow and she's like, I'm this guy's daughter. But I do like Punchline. But Punchline's another one of those characters that, made by James Tynion, and then other people took over and it just kind of didn't go anywhere. One of the people being Teenie Howard, where she was writing I think that Punchline miniseries, though, that she wrote with her husband was one of the better things that she's done. How big was it? It was so big that at the point when you did have Punchline come out, and I'm telling you, again, I have a song for it, but the idea, it's like, I have a song about it, here it goes. The idea of people really going to Punchline, but saying, I like Punchline because Harley's bullshit. I said at that point, Harley needed to go away. Joker, and Yule, if he's still in here, has popped in and out saying things about Joker. But Joker, you can't have the Joker in every story. He has to go away for a while so that when he comes back, it means something. I thought at the one point, Harley has to go away for a year, 2 years, something like they just have to bite the bullet, and you have to make it so that people want her back. You have to get to the point where people start saying, I miss Harley. Harley was cool. I like Harley. But you just kept boom, boom, boom. And there's another character, though. We go Jason, Todd, Damian, another character. This could be its whole other thing, too. Another character that you never know what you're going to get, because these writers, when they jump on, it depends on what they read, and people don't like to go full out. Harley, to me, is a multi-layered character. A goofy character at times, but also very smart. Also a girl who thinks she wants to do the right thing, but can't quite do it, and does it in the worst possible way, and goes through all these things. One of the best Harley stories is when, not the miniseries, but when it showed up in her book, when Power Girl got conked in the head and lost her memory, and Harley convinced her that they were a superhero team. And then Power Girl realized, but then at the end got pissed off. But then after that, they went back and did a mini series that I hated. I thought it was terrible. It was one of the few times in that time where it was a DC thing, like, hey, this happened between these two panels. You did that with Super Sons later too. But yeah, it was a good story, and it really was fun with Harley. I think that the actual story opens up with Sportsmaster, and they're in like a mall, and pretty cool. Yeah, and Yule said for multiple issues. And yeah, I just end up where I wish Harley would kind of go away for a while and then maybe come back at a point when people would like her, and also nail it down. Like I said, the character has so many different facets, but most people go with goofy Harley. Oh, I'm going to be sexual. I'm going to be over the top. And it doesn't really play out as well for me. I thought Stephanie Phillips did an okay job. I don't think she's a top tier writer, obviously, but I think that she did a decent job. And lo and behold, she made me fall in love with that Kevin on that book. And that was somebody, when I saw that guy with that tattoo and that nonsense, I was like, what? But you end up where it's a cool thing in a Harley book to have somebody who grounds her like that. That is a pretty cool play. Yeah, and then Lane says we need Bateman to get a comic and save the day some. You also have common sense. I like Wallace West. I'm glad he is his own person. I liked Wallace at the beginning. I remember when Brett Booth came out and said that a lot of people were like attacking him because of Wallace and his color. I thought that was ridiculous. I did like, remember at the end of the New 52, they ended up, or the DCYU, I think there was the issue with Wallace when he was at school and he was playing like dodgeball and stuff. I forget what exactly was happening, but remember when Wallace was like really into like souping up cars and stuff? He was making that white hot engines and thing. I don't know any car talk, but he was doing that a lot. I like that. Yeah, and then American Texan said they tried to split Harley's codependency from Joker and ended up creating codependency with Poison Ivy. Yeah, the Palmiotti and Connor did that when she basically went in and punched him out in the jail and said, F you. But yeah, you get that. And again, I think that they always think that Harley needs a character with her. But like I said with Kevin, I like more when she has somebody grounding her and that ends up making her want to be better, but not in like a preachy way. Like Kevin had his own problems, but they were kind of getting through them together. And she was there. Like you got that, you were able to see that side of her that cared about somebody, not just, lusting for Pam, which is, what it is. I'm telling you, it drives me nuts. With what they do with Harley, and they're all over the place. And then Who Dat Nation 12 says we need someone to capture the hype Yara Flor initially had. Yeah, weird thing with Yara Flor, it was odd. Like at the one point they released some, sketches. You had a picture of them. People went nuts. They thought she was great. And then you're, oh my God, they're going to have a TV show, but that would cost too much. I'm like, when are we going to get an issue? When are we going to find out any sort of, and what happens? This happened with Naomi, whether you like Naomi or not. The idea, you cannot elevate a character before you set up the character or you're past the setting up. I mean, you elevate Naomi to a point where she was on the Justice League on the cover in front of everybody else. And in the issue, she would say every single time, I don't know what my powers are. Or the other two sentences. I don't know what my powers were. Or I just got my powers yesterday. Oh, did you? And that it never went because it didn't have time now. You already went past it. You already went past the idea of her failing. This is why I love younger and new characters. Because I love seeing them not just succeed. I like to see them fail. I like to see them learn how it is, but usually when you have it, it's done in a way that's positive. Like positive in the way of they think it's cool. Oh my God, I'm a hero now. I always wanted to be this. You get Batman. He ain't saying that anymore. Guy's miserable. He's just sitting there. I mean, the guy's waiting. He has all these contingency programs of if he dies, but I swear to God, he's just waiting for it. He just wants to die. So he ends up where you have, again, Naomi, but again, Jaber. How do you continue with a character? First off, that the creator ends up, you don't want any parts of him, but even so, how do you continue with a character that never was established? You don't even know her power set. It changed. It would do this, then that. You would go through rifts to her world and back again, and nothing was ever set up. And Bendis just kept trying to, again, one of the biggest things with Bendis, besides that dialogue, is just everything drawn out and drawn out. The funniest thing was, even though it's really good, but his beginning of the Ultimate Spider-Man, where you get, what took Stan Lee 3 pages, it took him like eight issues, but I liked him. But still, he ended up where that book, and he realized, I think, at one point, well, he's a smart guy. And then here's another thing, too. A really nice guy. He's a really, really good guy, Bendis. So with that, though, he ended up, I swear to God, every issue became, okay, I'm going to make this collectible by showing this. Or, okay, this is the one where it's collectible because first of the costume. Now we're going to name this person. It drove me nuts. And I ended up fighting with people over and over because that first Naomi, you could not find somebody. Now, everybody in here will say, and they probably didn't like it, but I'm talking when people were out and about and reviewing, you couldn't find somebody who would say anything even remotely negative about Naomi. And I kept saying, I think she might be a really cool character, but I don't know what the hell's going on. And then it's almost the same path in a different way because you establish some things at least. But the Naomi path was Miss Marvel path as well, where it's like, okay, this character is now going to be elevated, so let's put a hold on any development and just make her great. and great with, I don't need, if Batman tells me a character's great, but I haven't seen it, I ain't trusting Batman. Guy's sus as hell. I don't need Superman to say, oh my God, you're great, Naomi. I don't need freaking Captain America to say I'm the biggest Miss Marvel fan. What the hell do I care? Right? If he was here, if Steve Rogers legitimately was real and in this deal and said right now that Miss Marvel's the best, greatest hero ever, I'd tell him he's full of crap. Though I like Miss Marvel. I'm a Miss Marvel fan. But to a point where she gets elevated. And now what you get, again, with that whole play, Jason Todd, Robin, Damian, all this, she's stuck in a rut now. They don't know what to do because all you do with Kamala Khan, it's getting all messed up. All you do with her now is every writer has to be on there to say how great she is. It's one of the biggest problems, I think, with a lot of characters. I think that there is, even Tom King, I don't think means to do something right, but the idea of Wonder Woman, like it's hard to find the idea of like, man, Wonder Woman really fucked up there. Like, man, she really did something wrong or whatever, because oh my God, you can't do anything like that. Wonder Woman has to be perfect or whatever. It's just the crazy, stupid story around her. Yeah. Common sense said, Kamala, my hero. Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah, Peter says that. And even the idea where I keep yelling, I think I was yelling with maybe Sully or Gray, but the idea of, Kamala ends up and she's working at Oscorp in an internship of something she's never done before. It's so forced. I just don't get it. And then remember the Teen Titans Power Girl that was shuffled? I love that Power Girl. Now it's funny because I always do know, but her code name was Powerhouse, which you want to tie it in. That's what they gave the future name of Naomi. So much bullcrap. She was awesome. Remember the thing is with the Stroke Squad when you had that Deathstroke with those really cool outfits. If you remember, a lot of the money was hers that funded it. Remember they had that big deal, and then she ended up disappearing. With the other part into a rift. They ended up, and I keep waiting for her to come back. They even thought that she might have deleted herself, if that's the right terms anymore. I think that, but she didn't. I liked her. Why can't I remember her name? I always yell about her. She's one of when we ever talk about characters that we like that everybody's forgotten and you don't see anymore. She is like number 3 on my list. I love her, but let me see. Power Girl, that's true. Somebody's probably already figured out. I could just wait for that. But yeah, that Deathstroke book was pretty good for a while. That Christopher Priest deal I thought was pretty cool. Tanya Spears, yeah, I remember, and Tanya Spears. I remember because when I first started, you think of Britney Spears, right? But I liked her hairdo. She kind of did look, and at points I did say recently that I saw a Moon Girl picture that looked a lot like Tanya. They kind of had the same kind of look. And I like that look. I actually like Moon Girl as well. But I like a lot of I like young heroes because, again, they're optimistic and they want to try. And they think that I like that they think they can change the world. What it is when you end up, and people will have the same deal. You'll have some friends and, you go to college, they go to college, whatever. But then they come back that first Thanksgiving, right? They come back from that Thanksgiving break right away. And they think that everything that they're doing is going to change the world. Like, you don't get it. I'm like, I get it. No. I'm this. And then by the time they graduate, they're like, this sucks. Like, this world's bullcrap. And then talk to them like 10 years later, they've given up. Given up is what's going on. Bunker's another character that I liked as well. Here, the funny thing is, Jaber asked, Marvel All New, All Different or New 52? I like New 52 better, but Marvel All New, All Different is when I started reading Marvel. I just ended up where you get that, and we started the podcast then with the fresh start. People forget about the fresh start, where you had a lot of new number ones, and that was driving me nuts. Common Sense as Common Sense, DC and Warner Brothers should give Yaraflor an animated short film from DC Showcase, not CW. Jeremy Adams wrote the Ted Cord animated. Yeah, I actually agree. If they were going to, Yaraflor, when they were going to do the TV show, I'm not a guy who watches any TV, barely watch a movie anymore. But I said to Eric, who I was doing things with, I think we even had a news segment on the idea that they were pitching a show or they were greenlit, but we had to wait and see. I said, there's no way they're going to be able to do this. This thing is going to cost too much money. There is no way. An animated, I didn't even think of that. An animated deal, a short film, an animated thing would have been better. They should have done that. It would have been really cool. And you might have gotten that weird play where a character is introduced in comics, but is actually developed in the other media, because you'd never really, again, Yara was so cool. But then you have Yara now, and this is one thing I think that nobody besides us would know. But does Tom King know that she grew up in like Idaho? Like, he has her as if she just walked out of the rainforest half the time when he has her talk or whatnot. She was given to her aunt and uncle, like, who I don't even think we've ever seen again. But she, grew up in middle U.S. and whatnot, and then discovered the stuff and went back. But do you remember at the beginning when you had that bus driver that was all hot for her, whatever? What happened to that guy? That guy, remember, he was giving her like clothes out of the lost and found deal, and then end up she saved him at that one point. You also had the idea of river gods and who are dead, and everything just got kind of pushed aside because they tried to elevate her in the way. I think that, and also I think that one of the plays too was that future state, because then you show her in the future, then you're past some of the cool things. And I would have liked to have seen her fully go to, well, I like the idea of having the different, pantheons and the different segments of the Amazons, expand that. But that whole trial of the Amazon nonsense and all that crap, great. But I would have liked to have seen her, reconnect, train, maybe have Wonder Woman take her under her wing, stuff like that. But you never really got any of that. You never got any part of stuff that would matter to a character. And I keep saying the idea of, people say, again, what do you like better? Would you read a bad story with good art, bad story, that sort of thing? What's more important, story or art? And in that, I go story, but before that, I go character work. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again, that character work done properly will make you a fan of the character. It's not like I'm sitting there and saying, I fell in love with this character only because of this one story, and that's how it gets started. But you become a fan of the character because of the character. Character work in good stories usually get good character work, but you can have character work besides that, and that's what connects you to the character. That's what connects you to the stories. And I'll tell people till the day I die next week is the idea that if you have a foundation, not of sand, but of character work that is really good, and you fall in love with a character, you can go through trades of shitty stories as long as you love the character. Like, you will end up. That's why Nick Lowe takes advantage of all the Spider-Man fans. They're a fan of the character. And it's been bad, and there are people who years and years after it's been good will keep going. You have Batman and stuff, and there's collecting and stuff involved too. But the idea, and I say again, I don't want to upset common sense because he'll say the same thing with indies, and it's true. When you get an indie comic, you have to set that up. If you think of the really good indie comics, it's because the character work was great and it continues. That's why. Yeah, you'll have some stories that are so wacky or whatever, but you end up character work, and that's what manga does in spades. You end up, the first 2 chapters of a manga are almost always, if not 80% character, 20% story. Usually when you get that first oversized manga chapter, you don't even realize what the story is until the end. Oh, those two are now going to go to school together and they're going to end up fighting ghosts. All right. Like, before that, you're getting the background of the characters. Then you're seeing how the characters react. What's the change? Usually you do have in one of the acts, the second or third act of a manga, is the idea of, okay, what is their attitude now? Why are they doing this and whatnot? And you get everything that by the end, you say, I really like this character. And if it's not done well, you're like, screw this. Like, you don't continue. And I think it's a big, big thing. In that, Common Sense says, Sam Humphrey's Weird World is part of All New, All Different. Can't believe that comic is almost 10 years old. I can't believe somebody mentioned Sam Humphreys in the stream. I don't like Sam Humphreys at all. He wrote Harley as well. He blocked me because of Harley. And again, because I had to remind him that Harley was Jewish, and he denied it and then blocked me because he was wrong. So he's another guy. Guy smokes too much pot, allegedly. I don't like him at all. I think he's a hack. But MH Comics Invictus says Red Lantern was the title I bought the most consecutive issues, but the art fell off a cliff. Atrocitus, origin and conflict with the Manhunters was good. Yeah, and then later, like, you had the Peter Milligan stuff, and then it ended up being the Charles Soule stuff. And it was funny that at that one point in the New 52, that the Red Lanterns became like this hot ticket. It was like the cool thing to like at one point because of Zillia Sox and Dexstar, and it was fun. It was really, really fun, that book. And then Guy Gardner involved. And I'm trying to think, and it's going to upset me, and I don't even know because people forget stuff. I forget more than most. Oy vey is right. I was like, really? Like, and he got mad at me, and I wasn't even being mean. I said, because he had something, and it was in an issue or something that he said, whatever it was, but it was like, instead of Hanukkah, I just said, hey, I just want you, and he's like, no. I'm like, yes. But yeah, there was a podcast, and I really liked them. It was two guys. Sometimes they had their wives on, and it was something radio. The one guy had that hair, and the other guy did that thing. They would, at the point, they would really go on, and it was always like anytime the Red Lanterns book would come up, they'd laugh about the blood party. And that was always the thing, because every issue seemed to have a blood party. It made me laugh so much. It was something like, I'm telling you, wait a minute, it was something weird. It was something odd. I just like, this seems odd. So I just wanted to ask him, and he got mad. And then I just think he wanted to silence me. And then I was like, whatever. Yeah, I saw Sam Humphries back at Marvel writing Thunderbolts. Let's hope it's better than Lansing and Kelly. And that is a low bar. But I think that it might be the last thing, I guess, that I read of Sam Humphries, and I know you liked it. Common Sense, I know you had to, was his Dial H. I didn't love it. It was fun. It was part of that Wonder Comics with Bendis. That was okay. It was kind of fun, but I don't know. It's one of those where I like Dial H so much again, and I like the New 52 version deal, and it ended up where I didn't like the Wonder Twins much in that deal. That was Mark Russell. He did some wacky things with that as well. That got like sexy at one point, very odd. Yeah. So Miguel Sepulveda on art on the Red Lanterns was great. Says MH Comics Invictus. I'm trying to think. I mean, some of the other books we kind of danced around a bunch of things. Plus, I have to cough real quick. I got to cough and get a drink here. All right. I have a coffee, but it didn't have ants in it, but I'm not done it yet. So I'll keep drinking that. But let me get to my thing where I had the books, because there's some of the other books. I'll just go through some of the books that I really did like. And without the New 52, I don't think we ever would have got some of these books. And they were always, when I go through and look, they were some of the side things. A book that I thought was pretty cool was Batwing. You ended up changing that. You ended up having I guess David, I can't remember his full name, but then it changed to Luke Fox. And that's when Jimmy Palmiotti, I think it was still Palmiotti and Gray, that did that. And it's funny, when they took over the book, some of the coolest covers, I thought, because you'd end up where you have that lit up symbol, and he was always in the dark, and you'd have that lit up symbol. But at one point, Luke in that was like a UFC fighter. And I remember one of the art. I thought it was fun. I just thought it was a fun play. He went to Maxie Zeus's island. They were having some big tournament. That was pretty cool. Batwoman was a really good book, I thought. And then you ended up having that whole play with the wedding, not wedding, being able to be married thing that kind of put that damper on that. But originally, that book was really good. And then it turned into like an over-the-top action type book. That was kind of wacky. Birds of Prey was garbage. I reviewed a bunch of those. Not great. Christy Marks, I believe, did that. It wasn't really good. Blackhawks was just an odd book. It was odd, and you changed a bunch of. It was, again, if you would go through these and you mentioned some of these, you know that some of these like that wasn't going to work. But I already said Catwoman that I did like at points, and then Innocenti took over and it became completely wacky. Captain Atom was okay. I didn't really know the character, and I thought that the book was kind of boring. Firestorm was kind of a wreck, but we talked about that. That's one of Eric's favorite characters, so he was reading that. You had Deathstroke went through a bunch of iterations, but you had like Kyle Higgins at the beginning. It was okay. Then Tony S. Daniel. Then you had a bunch of other things going on. I did like Flash when you had, what's it called? Oh, God, I can't even remember. I should click on these and see. I know that it was Buccellato and Menopole. I did like that. At the one point, though, you had that story where it was like Brainiac, and then people got like the 10th level intellect, and they disappeared, and Lois, and it was very Iris and all was well. It was very, very odd. But I did like that. There were a lot of these books. Again, there's a lot of cool books that went on. Enzo214 said Silencer and Sideways need to have a comeback. I like Silencer. Silencer was pretty good. I remember Silencer showed up then in that Nightwing race. Was nonsense. Sideways never really got started in my mind. I had a song about both, by the way. But yeah, a lot of people now, they only mention the Terrifics from that whole initiative. But some of the books are okay. I remember me and Brandon ended up doing Damage. That book wasn't great. Not great at all. But yeah, recently bought Frankenstein Agent of Shade trade paperback, says MH Comics Invictus. Yeah, Menopole. I love Menopole's art. I think it's pretty cool. I know everybody has artists they like and don't like, but I did like that. Bartor, aka New 52 Kid Flash, should have been Inertia. There was a lot of weird things in a lot of those Teen Titans books. You know, Wonder Girl was very odd. At one point, it was like a Breakfast Club situation in that, and it just weird. But yeah, again, I didn't read a ton of the Teen Titans until we started doing the podcast, and never really liked much of the New 52 deal until near the end, maybe. I think that's just when I ended up reviewing it, but didn't really like it. Like, there was a ton of Suicide Squad books, too, and I liked some of the runs that we got out of it. Leonard Pig says New 52 was a great impression of Image Comics. It sold at first, and they were trying to do something, but yeah, they tried. And then you have Common Sense Terrifics as part of James Gunn's DCU. That's why there's a new collection in June. I was one of the few that I when it was Jeff Lemire at the beginning, I thought it was complete and utter shit. I thought it was the most ridiculous book I've ever read, because it was just Fantastic Four, and he didn't even make any bones about it. But I ended up liking it by the end. And then and I like Jeff Lemire, but when Gene Luen Yang showed up, I liked it enough. It just never was my favorite. I like Silencer the most of those books. I thought that, and it's Dan Abnett at one point, John Romita Jr. on art, and then he kind of left it, and he had a bunch of things going on. But I liked that. That was kind of a cool thing to do, that whole play, but it was odd. It was very odd. And yeah, Common Sense, when the Terrifics and all that in the DCU, I don't know if I'm going to go see Superman. I kind of want to, but I don't think I ever will. I don't think I'll ever get to it. I just, that's not my thing. But it's not because I don't like James Gunn, because I did like a bunch of his Marvel stuff. But I haven't really watched any DC movies or animated anything. When people ask me, I ended up flipping out at the one point on the aficionados and like, well, what's your favorite Superman movie? I'm like, well, I guess I'll pick the one that I saw. I've actually seen 3 Superman movies. I've seen Superman 78. I saw Superman 2, and I did see Man of Steel, but I was taken to see that for my birthday. Those are the 3. And Silencer is the best one, but CW can even elevate his comic. But yeah, it'd be funny. We should have like a poll or like a contest thing. Name the DC movies Jim has seen, because that list is not big, and you'd be amazed. But it's just, again, it's not my thing. I know that everybody likes to talk about the movies and the cartoons, but I wish I could tell you that I've watched them. Immortal Man comic is boring. That book, ooh wee, yeah. The Immortal Man and it was funny because Eric was the only one who liked it, and he kept yelling, "We're getting a War of the Immortals," and I'm like, "We're getting shit. This thing's going to be canceled." And it was, yeah. And the new Challengers. Remember, Scott Snyder bailed off it after a couple issues, and another guy did the rest. And you had that one. What was the one? What? I don't think it was The Unexpected, but was it? What was the one that what's his name? I mentioned him earlier. Oh God darn it! I'll think of it later. It was one of the later ones. I don't even know it was part of that initiative, but it seemed like it was, with Steve Orlando when he jumped on and had a couple. I think he might have done The Unexpected, but it was another one. Justice League Crisis on Two Earths animated movie is great. That'd be fun. That's what you should do. Tell me what you love, the movies and the cartoons, and we'll see if because I've never seen that. And it'll just be me saying I didn't see anything. But I did read that New 52. So we talked a bunch of other things as well. We're over the 2-hour mark. It was weird not having a show on Friday night. It was very odd. I almost popped on last night, and I was just going to talk random nonsense, but I didn't. I'm halfway through editing our DC podcast, and it's a long one. It wasn't going to be. There's not a lot of books. And just the idea, tonight I will be back with the best of the week. I'll be doing the best comics tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I think it might be the shortest show that we've ever done because there weren't a lot of good books this week. And even that, good books are different than best of books. And there was not a lot of best of, not a lot at all. Curse of Brimstone I hated. I couldn't stand that book. Wasn't that Justin Jordan? I don't like him either. I don't think he's very good. But yeah, I did not like that book. One of the few, we reviewed most of them. That one we dropped. I just didn't like it. I did finish it, but I didn't really love it. And yeah, was the Common Sense will be the only one who knows. Was the Unexpected, was that where that guy came with that cowboy hat? He was like that sexy cowboy guy. Because I swear, were the Electric Men in that as well? Because that's where was Electric Warriors another one, or were they just in The Unexpected? Because I remember a bunch of nonsense in that, and their Flashpoint Paradox is a personal favorite from MH Comics Invictus, and the vote if I saw that or not, I did. I actually watched that because I was doing a review on it, and I did actually like it. Batman versus the Accuser League has a great take on Damian. I have not seen that. The new Batman, you have Comics Invictus saying it was really fun. I've actually had a couple people talk to me about that as well. But just to give you the basics, people love that Batman the Animated Series, right? I couldn't tell you. I've never seen a second of it. Actually, I'm wrong. I did see the first issue. I did a podcast. A guy asked me to do it, but that's it. That was in the Electric Warriors. Oh, God. That was so bad. That was. Remember also when there was some of the Vertigo books, and what was the book? There was. This is going to be a very obscure way of trying to get the information because I want to see if Common Sense or anybody knows what this was. But somehow Electric Warriors, the name reminds me. But it was the girl who was involved in some of that Gamersgate stuff, and legitimately or supposedly allegedly. Had a guy delete himself because of messages she sent. Was her name like Chloe or something? But she ended up doing a Vertigo book, and it was one of the worst things that I've ever read in my life. But if you ended up reviewing it poorly, she would attack you and get people and sick them on you. And so I gave it a 2, and I didn't give a shit. And I laughed at all of them that yelled at me because the book was fucking terrible. I think her name was Chloe something. I can't remember. Maybe somebody will know, or maybe it wasn't even real. Yeah, I've seen one episode of the Batman the Animated Series. I don't think I've seen any other cartoons that came out. I've never seen Batman Beyond. I've never saw any of the Green Lantern stuff. Movie-wise, the Batman movies, I've seen Batman 89 and Batman Begins. That is it. Though lo and behold, I saw Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 84 because I did podcasts on both of those. You kind of get a trend there. I did see the Snyder cut of the Justice League movie, and I'm still searching for my 7 hours of life that was depleted from me. But I did that for I think it was High Level. Yep, it was High Level was the book. What was that girl's name? I remember she was involved in nonsense. It wasn't Hex Wives, but it was High Level. Hex Wives actually started out okay. Common Sense. Hex Wives was the one where you ended up where there was a town and you see that the ladies are kind of like witches and stuff, I think, right? High Level was unreadable in my mind. It made no sense. It was like, hey, look, this is a video game on paper. It was like, this is fucking terrible. In fact, the guy who did this, Pete from NYC, ended up reviewing it with me and legit quit everything that he almost blamed me for doing that. He lost off. He quit talking or doing anything with comics after that. I think I've heard from him twice, and that book came out a long time ago. It was bad. Back to I haven't seen the Aquaman movies. I haven't seen, these are just the DC things. What else? I saw the first Shazam. I like that, and my son wanted to watch that, so I watched that. Whatever else there is, Batman v Superman. I got through like a second of it. I bailed, and also the Robert Pattinson's Batman movie. I watched about 10 minutes and bailed, and then I ended up not watching the Joker stuff, so didn't do that. MH Comics Invictus says Batman Bad Blood animated. I like Dick assumes the mantle of Batman, a la Morrison Quietly. That sounds pretty good. Pretty cool. I think I remember when that news came out, all I kept doing was singing the Taylor Swift song. So where my priorities lie. I think I even did I think I did a parody song with it. Super Sons by Jeremy Adams movie. I haven't seen that. Maybe eventually. What I need is younger kids again. I'll have to tell my wife to get on it. She can't. That was the thing. I think that she got mad at me. At the one point, we had 5 kids. I don't like to tell our 5th son, Logan, that he was a mistake, but he wasn't exactly, we weren't thinking of having another kid. But at the one point, Tanya ended up saying to me, you need to get a vasectomy. And I said to her, well, I know you're done with kids, but I'm not. Like, later on, maybe I'll still need that when you're done. And I think it was that she already had a hysterectomy, and she said, well, you should get a vasectomy. I'm like, why would I do that? I'm not done. You might be. Something like that. She got mad. She got really mad at me. Oh, well. But, when you have little kids and stuff, they get inspired and want to see things. That's why they really were into a lot of the Marvel movies. So I've seen more Marvel movies than DC because I would take them. We would go every Sunday. We would go to the movies. And for a while there was a lot of Marvel stuff. And to this day, 3 of my sons' favorite movie of all time is Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think it was because we just had so much fun watching it as well. Then we went to go see Guardians 2 and got a flat tire on the way. And it took a while for me to watch it then because we didn't get to see it in the theater. I was very upset. Yeah. American Texan, there's a lot more dumb things that I said. At one point, we were out back. We had this, it wasn't a big pool. I'm no Rockefeller, but it was one of those like pools you can buy and, you put up and fill the water in. I guess that's what most pools are, but it was like an inflatable type deal. And we're there and she's there in a bathing suit, whatever. And I'm just standing there and I'm like, you have a really broad back. And I meant it as a compliment. I was like, pretty strong, like sturdy. It was like I was like in 1840. I'm like, you could really, you have those childbearing hips. But I told her, like, you have a really wide back. Like, it's really strong back. And boy, she was mad. Yeah, I didn't see Guardians 3 yet. I did not see that. I didn't like Guardians 2. And so I haven't gotten to Guardians 3. I say I don't watch a lot, but I don't watch. I don't want to sound like I think I'm fancy. Like I'm not like the idea of like, well, actually I only watch this or that or whatever. But usually now I do watch a lot of documentaries. But it's not just because of pretentious still. It's just because, you learn a little thing. They're usually about an hour and a half long, in and out, whatever. But I did watch that Led Zeppelin documentary. That was the last movie I saw recently. I did see that. Dark Knight Returns 2-part animated movie is an awesome adaptation of Frank Miller's story. I heard that. Sounds like I was like doing some hype. I did watch all of The Brave and the Bold, and I actually watched it with my son Ethan, and I had a ball. I thought it was great. And in fact, I borrowed it. I borrowed the disc set from Eric, and when we got to the final, I think the final 2 episodes, for some reason the disc failed, and so I liked it so much I went out and bought the set myself because we did that. Hey Martin, look at Martin there. What up? Is we're almost at the end. It's like 2 hours and 13 minutes. I love Martin. Yeah, we were talking some New 52 for a while, but we got involved in a lot of other things that were nonsense. But that's how the deal is. Oh, and but MH Comics Invictus says the original RoboCop actor voices old Bruce Wayne in the Dark Knight Returns animated movie. I did see the first RoboCop. I see a lot of first movies, and then I kind of have trouble then continuing on because I lose track of things. Once I lose track of things, I'm done, and you'll never get me to go. Suicide Squad: Assault on Arkham, amazing movie. Batman hunting down the squad, not the squad, I hope, but yeah. I have to at some point maybe again. The way I can watch movies is I make a podcast about it. And the podcast would be Jim is forced to watch some movies. Would be kind of fun. But I'm telling you, we have a cartoon show on our Patreon. And Mark, Batman Beyond Mark is his name. He does it with me. And every month I feel bad. He gets a hold of me. Are we doing it this month? And I'm like, it takes me so long to watch a movie. Even if it's just an animated episode. It takes me forever. I forget what happened. I have to go watch it again. I'm taking notes. It's like, oh my goodness. It's so much work. It's so much work, and I'm a lazy man. But yeah, Martin says, I'm rereading Tony Daniels' Batman run, everything before New 52. Tony Daniels just ended up with Jared talking about the Superman Wonder Woman book in the New 52. That's more of a second wave deal. But boy, his art in that is crazy. Well, Wonder Woman is sexy as hell. She's going around in them boots, stuff like that. I'm like, holy crap. It's funny. You're like, oh my God, she's getting beaten up by Doomsday. And somehow I got to run off to the bathroom. I'm like, what is going on here? I don't know what I'm into anymore. But yeah, it was good. And there's a book too that people forget about or don't like. It goes down to who you want Superman to be with. But that Superman Wonder Woman book was pretty good. I did like that book a lot. Yeah, so there you go. MH Comics Invictus haven't been back to theaters since Godzilla -1, but watched Thunderbolts the other day. Wink, wink. Yeah, I'm telling you, Comics Invictus. I watched that Led Zeppelin documentary. Wink, wink. Anything that I mentioned that I've seen any bits of in the past 10 years, I'm winking and winking. But yeah. Actually, Guy Trevitt, who I talked to a lot and has been on our podcast, he just got a hold of me right before I started and actually said that he just had seen Thunderbolts. I think he might have went to the theater. Wink, wink. But he said he loved it. He said it was great. I hear people saying this and that, and some people say it's too dark or this, whatever. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. But a couple people that I talk to that normally don't really like stuff really liked it. So, yeah. Oh, I mentioned it slightly at the beginning with Tony S. Daniels' Deathstroke. It was a trip. That was pretty crazy. And but yeah, so I guess that's about it. Gray had told me to watch Godzilla -1, but he's in Japan, so I think he thinks it's a documentary. That's why he probably heard I like documentaries, so he's there. That was always Eric's joke. I don't even know if it's an old joke, but the idea that he's never going to Texas because he saw that documentary and he's never going there. Keith says that my son loved Thunderbolts. I thought it was all right. Again, though, I don't know. It's kind of cool. Now, I get the idea. I'm going to say it's cool when, younger kids or whatever, and he's like, my son's 38. But I'm assuming he's a bit younger. But yeah, and Common Sense says Thunderbolt's a great movie. And he's seen more positive praise. I keep having people tell me. It's funny, too, because this is how legit, when I talk about some of the things, how legit it is ingrained in some people, because we've been doing the podcast for over 10 years, and I talk about this all the time. They'll get a hold of me, and the first thing everybody says, I know you'll never see it, but that Thunderbolts is really cool. And I'm like, oh, that's cool then. That's cool. And actually, I think that Trev had actually said the thing that he knows will get me is that he legit said it reminded him of seeing Guardians of the Galaxy for the first time. So I don't know if that's legit, if he's just trying to get me because he knows how much I like that. So Taskmaster is dead like everyone predicted. That's a spoiler. I shouldn't have said that. Yes, that Taskmaster was weird. I saw that Black Widow movie, whatever that thing was. That wasn't great. That was not very good. Again, podcast. It was, we had a movie podcast at one point, and I really like doing it. It would drain me. I can't even explain. There's some people who I've talked to, even in the chat and stuff, that kind of get it or have the same problem that I have. But it's not just like with having attention deficit disorder and things like that. Like what I really wanted, I wanted to have the one that you're all fired up. Like I wish that I had hyper, deal. I wish that it was me like, man, I'm doing this and I can't wait to. I have inattentive. And inattentive is the idea where I'll lose track of 2 hours. I realize that I was doing stuff I don't even remember. I end up where people are talking to me and it's not even actively zoned out, but I don't hear anything. And when I do buckle down and say, watch a movie that's 2 hours long, it feels like I have gone through the ringer. I should get combat. I'm looking for my medals because I definitely was in a combat zone because I had to fight to watch the whole thing. And legitimately, when that's done, I am so exhausted. I just end up passing out usually for like 12 hours and it's awful. I hate it. I hate everything about it. Usually at the beginning when we started our podcast and things like that, I would never mention it because I was embarrassed and I thought that people would think that I'm just making shit up and whatnot. I think that after you hear me talk for 2.5 hours, you realize that there's nothing that is off, whatever. I will go off on tangents, can't remember things. Like when you're doing a podcast, it's not great to go off on a tangent of something you don't remember, where you're sitting there like it's that person like that, but I can't help it. And it drives me completely insane. And I hate it. That's the thing that I hate the most about myself. And it drives me nuts. But you end up, MH Comics Invictus says, where are these other podcasts? Do you put links in the description? Most of them, unfortunately, if it's a thing, they're on the Patreon. Our Patreon, we have probably a weekly podcast, very weekly, probably on there. I'll go. The main feeds that we have, that I have the links, are the DC podcast that comes out Sunday night. We have the Marvel podcast, supposed to come out Sunday night, but that gets a little wonky. And we used to have a bunch of manga stuff. Those were like the main shows, DC being the first one we started. So that's the big one, the Marvel stuff, whatever. And then on our Patreon, we have early access to most of those, but then we also end up having a spotlight show each week. We talk about it on the main podcast, that we talk about 2 books that are picked by the patrons to just talk on the Patreon. But we also end up having a lot of reading club podcasts, we call them. I know Wes from Thinking Critical, so makes fun of me about that. But we have a Grant Morrison podcast. We have a Year One podcast. We have an Elseworlds podcast. We have a Hellboy podcast, a Walking Dead podcast, a Book of the Month podcast. Let me think of what else we have. We have a Mark Miller podcast. We have, at points, a movie and a cartoon podcast. We have a Manga Monday podcast. I'm trying to think. There's so many that we have. That's a lot of them. But yeah, that's what they're on. They're on our Patreon. And some of them, like, say, the Walking Dead podcast, we're going through the deluxe. We're on episode like 111. So these things have been going on for quite some time. And if people did want to get involved or they wanted to check it out, again, you can get a free trial for a week to see, what's going on or whatnot. And legit, MH, if you end up messaging me, I'll give you a bit of a free trial as well if you want to check some things out. And anybody, if you want to message me and you're interested, they changed it up on the Patreon. It's pretty cool. You can give out some free trials. So if anybody is interested, I'm never opposed to doing that. So just email me at that weird science dccomics@gmail.com and put okay to print. Actually, just put in the subject line Patreon trial or something like that, and I'll hook you up and you could check some things out. We have that New 52 review podcast that we were doing. We haven't been, and some of the things that we had done that haven't really been done lately, but still a lot of episodes. I did a Silver Age comics podcast. I did a Secret Origins podcast. And one of the things that finished, because it was only a certain amount of issues, one of the things I loved doing was the Batman or Detective Comics Before Batman, which was talking about the Slam Bradley issues of Detective Comics before Batman showed up. And they're so hateful. And the reason I ended up doing that is because DC was going to put out a trade with that name. And then they, got around to reading the Slam Bradley stuff. And they're like, yep, we can't do that. There's no way. But I loved it. It was so fun. But that's there. There's a lot of stuff. There's a ton of stuff. I mean, legit. Image Convictus. I do not watch anime. I am a manga fan. Recently, the guy who I was doing with, he's kind of bailed a bit because of he's getting older. He is. I actually, older means that he's like in his mid-20s and he got a job, so it was a problem. But at one point, of the amount of podcasts that we do each week, it's insane. But even on top of that, at one point, we had a reading club where we went through a chapter a week. I'm trying to think of the schedule because Sunday nights was Spy Family. Then I think Monday was, maybe Monday was Demon Slayer or My Hero, but I'll just tell you what we did. We did Spy Family. Then we had a separate one for Demon Slayer. We had a separate one for Jujutsu Kaisen. We had a separate one for My Hero Academia. We had a Chainsaw Man one and a Dragon Ball, the original OG Dragon Ball, and Death Note. We had all those each week. Yeah. And then also we had a weekly show that was on that reviewed the current stuff, mainly from the Shonen Jump deal. We had that each week for over a year or so, but that actually, it became way too much. And like I said, we were doing a bunch of things like that, but we have our Manga Monday show. This last episode that we did, I still have to edit, was on the Nice Prison, the new gag manga that's in the magazine. It's not good. But we just did Marshall King. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones we've done. But that actually, I think we're up until almost episode 200 of that one, the Manga Monday show. So yeah. I ended up at one point, a guy ended up in Comics Invictus, I saw you check. But the scheduling, one point this guy ended up saying, you don't really do all those things or whatever. And I ended up where I sent the picture of my calendar of the deal, and usually there's not a day that I don't do any show, but some of them there's up to 6 shows in a day, and it's crazy. And then Eric ended up quitting the DC show, so instead of doing one DC Comics podcast where we would do it every week at 3 to about 7, that maybe 6, 7, but it was always that time. Never failed. Also, the spotlight that I talked about, we would always do that on Thursday at 7:00 at night. So those were all set in stone. We did it. You knew what you were going to do. When he quit, suddenly I now have to, instead of me and one guy talking, it ends up being like me and 8 guys, and I have to kind of fix the schedule. And that is really, it's killed me. It ends up legit where, if I said at the beginning, I'm on a keto diet, I'm actually just going on a different eating deal to get a little more energy. I'm trying to get some energy back because I am just struggling. But so I eat all meat. That's what does it. And intermittent fasting and exercise. All the good stuff. That intermittent fasting, that really does work if you're somebody who, and again, I never, when I say this, I do worry. My father was a huge guy, humongous. I am not, but I like to do eating plans. It just forces me into keeping, a schedule and strict. And I actually do like having something in my life that's scheduled, even though I say I have a crazy schedule on my, comic stuff. That gets all wacky because this person will end up not doing it, whatever. And then I'm late for that, whatever. But I do like to keep a schedule with eating and stuff like that. And I eat the same thing just about every meal now. It's not great. You shouldn't do that, but also exercise. Also, I'm in this room talking, and it's like a sweat box. It's the pickle hot box in here. It's so hot. It is. It really is. Now I realize it is freaking hot in here. My dog's looking at me. It's funny too. I should make a video too of my dog because she's laying there. We have a bed that she lays in. The minute that I say to everybody, "Okay, that's it," and I end, she knows and gets up and knows we're going to go for a walk. And she hasn't there, so I guess we're not over yet, but we are. That'll be it. And I'm going to end with a song that is actually a song that I made for this last podcast that I'm still editing. It's a song that originally was supposed to be about the question all along the Watchtower, a book that you should never get near. It is really bad. And I'll talk more about, I think that tonight when I ended up, there it is, steak, fish, chicken, bacon. That's about it. And in the meantime, I haven't had as much fish as when I usually do it, but I've had a lot of steak, a lot of burger, a lot of chicken, and then a bit of bacon as well. And I have this like zero carb bread and wraps that I use. It's a lot easier now than when I first did it. Before you just have to go to like Burger King and get a Whopper and scrape off shit and throw away the bun. Now you can actually do things. Though I will tell you, I am now really the no carb bread. It's not great. You think at first it's great, like, oh my God, this is just bread, whatever. It does tend to have a flavor that sticks with you though, and then the more and more you do it, the more and more it sticks with you. Also, I'll tell you, I'm no Rockefeller, so usually when I do a keto diet, I eat a lot of eggs. I can't afford that shit now. Tell you, I'd have like 6-egg omelet or something like that. Though I was a trendsetter as a kid. When I ended up with the kid, I only ate egg whites. It was only because for some reason egg yolk would make me gag, and my dad would be so pissed. I'm sad that my dad's dead, not because I miss him, because he was not nice, but he would have really have gotten a kick out of how expensive eggs were, because he ended up when I was a kid and I would take the yolks out and he'd see me. I'd be separating them. I just didn't like, I had no concern or even knowledge about cholesterol or the fat, whatever I just didn't like the taste. So I would do it. And he'd yell at me that I'm wasting eggs and eggs are $12 a dozen. He would lie, but eventually it came true. So he would have gotten a kick out of it. But also, I also cook with only an air fryer right now because I don't have my son who's redoing the house got rid of what was pretty brand new oven. So I almost bought a grill today. I was inspired, but I used the air fryer. So I was looking up how to make fried eggs in the air fryer that don't turn out complete nonsense. And I did find a way, and I did buy a dozen eggs for the first time in a while. So there. And Common Sense ends up saying, did you see the clip with Crypto and Superman? Bits of it without audio. I want to avoid clips. I want to see the entire movie. Yeah, I did. I actually had if you do go over to Gray's, his channel, Wakazashi's Tea House, he actually, it's funny because I even say at the beginning, but he invited me over his channel to do a live, reaction video to the clip that when the first trailer came out. And I say at the beginning, like, I probably won't see it, but I don't watch stuff, but I did end up getting in fights with people in the chat, which I usually do. But I thought it would look cool. Yeah. And Fearmarnock says, Jim, you're still alive, took a whole shower, and you're still here. And I take a long, I don't have a shower here. I have to walk down the street to my son's house. I think I might go do that after. I take real long showers. I get pissed because I like hot-ass showers too. And I hate when you run out of hot water. So we ended up where we ended when we got a new water heater and things like that in the house. We got like a bigger one because we have 5 kids too. And I can't, if you would give me the idea of you have to take a cold shower or have somebody kick you in your privates, I would probably let them kick me in the privates. I cannot stand cold shower. I can't stand it. I hate it. It's like worse than anything. But yeah, I like to take long showers. My wife would get mad at me because I take hot showers in the summer. But then when you get out, it's cool, right? She takes cold showers. This is bullshit. Also, I like coffee any time of year. It doesn't matter if it's 200 degrees out. I still like hot coffee. That is it. So yes, Fearmarnock, you're back. I am getting out of here. We're just talking. What time is it? Holy crap. I actually didn't realize it was that late. I forgot we started late. I got to eat. I haven't eaten. This is intermittent fasting. I'm past the point. I'm gonna go eat something. I think I'm probably gonna eat a burger with bacon. That'd be pretty good. Maybe with bacon and on top of that, a piece of pork roll. Maybe I'll make pork roll as the bun. That'd be great. That'd be really cool. Maybe I'll make a burger with 2 pieces of grilled chicken as the bun. It's almost like that KFC. What was that? Like the super something? I can't remember what it is. Yeah. Oh, look at that. MH Comic Fixes says this dried whole egg powder, 0 carbs, bought a tub, but haven't tried it yet. I'd like to try that. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. At one point, I was going to get the container of the egg whites. That seemed to be a little cheaper, though. A guy across the street from me actually was selling brown eggs. He does it every year. I've never gotten them. The Double Down, that's what it was. I had the Double Down. When I first heard the Double Down, we have a KFC. It's like an hour away. I ended up, we had a hockey game, and it was still a distance away, but I ended up going, and we ended up going and getting Double Downs. And the first one I ever had was like, it had to have been sitting around forever. It was terrible. But this guy across the street, he sells brown eggs. And I kind of got inspired the other day, mainly probably why I bought the dozen eggs. And I think the dozen eggs I got at Aldi were like $3.80. It was still killing me. But the idea of these brown eggs, I was going to get them. And I ended up sending a text to my wife and said, hey, Donnie's eggs, are they okay? Like, is there anything wrong? And I did think that they wouldn't have been, processed, pasteurized, whatever it would be. So she said, don't eat them. You'll get sick. I almost still got them. It's weird, though. For some reason, when she started talking about it, the only thing I'm worried is I'd crack open an egg and there'd be like a chicken in it or something. Like, I don't need that. That would freak me out I'd never eat an egg again. At Outback Steakhouse, Alice Springs chicken recipe. I'm going to check that out because I am at the point where it's like the idea I say in comics a lot. I've done nothing and I'm all out of ideas. My recipes I'm doing is I think right now that I am excited to actually I'm going to put salt and pepper on this one. I'm mixing it up. I end up the same freaking thing. I said I eat the same thing over and over, but it does kind of, you need something going on. Yeah, that is too much protein for an omelet. Though also I was warned by my doctor that I may have in my days of working out and taking creatine and then doing the keto diet, I may have done some kidney injury. So I might have to watch out with the keto diet with this, but I'm enjoying it right now. I do have a lot more energy with the deal, and also the intermittent fasting is pretty cool too. That's it. We ended with like diet and not really exercise talk. I could tell you about that later. But I'm going to check out. I'm writing it right down. I'm going to get my phone here because I do need something new, something different. Because again, if you have done a keto diet, you'll know that you start to get used to and sick of the same flavors that you keep getting. One of the things too is that the idea of getting something crunchy. And a lot of people eat pork rinds. The problem is when I eat pork rinds, I start smelling like pork rinds because I eat a lot of them then. And I'm at the point now where I'm kind of sick of those as well. So I have, sugar-free Jell-O and stuff, which a lot of the stuff isn't necessarily given the thumbs up. But I have to do something. Though I'll ask because Comics Invictus seems to be in the know. Have you drank the bulletproof coffee at any point? In any of your things going, because I do like that, but I'm starting to get sick of that as well. I'm getting kind of sick of buttery coffee, and I'm not saying buttery as in like a flavoring deal. I'm talking like you got the grass-fed butter in there. So it's starting to get to me, but I'm still drinking it. It does give you a pep to your step. But I'm writing this down now. Here we go. Beep boop boo. Why wouldn't I do this as the theme song or the outro song's going? I don't know, but I'm going to go with this anyway. And then we will end this. Death Wish coffee is the best. I actually drank too much Death Wish coffee at one point. We had a bunch of coupons. It was because our youngest son, was homeschooled. And the program that he was in, because they're not there for lunch and things like that, they would send you coupons that you could use at like Walmart or BJ's or whatnot. And in the meantime, I don't feed my son, so the hell with that. But I went and we had all these and we had to use them. It always became a thing where like, oh God, they expire in a day. So we went and I bought a bunch of Death Wish coffee, and I drink a lot of coffee in the day. So you change up to a Death Wish coffee. I'm not going to change how much I drink just because I'm used to that. Hoo-wee. It was tough. It was tough. I actually have a bunch of no sugar energy drinks right now, but those all taste like shit. And I do like tea. But my I have an electric pot, and that also got filled with ants. And it's nonsense. I still haven't written this down. You got Alice Springs chicken, okay, and then we're gonna get going. But I'll be back in a couple hours. To check out the best of the week. Maybe I can get somebody involved with it. I don't know, but it'll be me at least coming in and checking things out. Not a great week, as I said. I didn't really love a lot of things, but I'm going to try to read a bunch of indies before, because of the big two, not much that made the list. In fact, I think when I do the show with him, he pointed out that I didn't give any goods, like I didn't like any of the big two. So, though that's not true, because I did like Red Hulk, but will it be a best of? I don't know. I figured and comics and big, I figured you meant sugar free. It'd be funny. Well, again, if you want to hear the funniest story ever with a keto diet to end this, is that, and I told this before, but the guy I work with, Big Bob, it was huge. He ended up having to be weighed at the vet deal with like the vet hospital. They'd have to strap him in like he was a horse or a cow, and they'd have to weigh him because he was, I think at one point, weighed like 800 pounds. And he wanted to do the keto diet because I was on it. It was working. Even though, again, I used it at that point just to get in better shape. I was playing a lot of hockey and stuff like that. And so he wanted to get involved. And I told him about it. And I spelled it out. Listen, and at that point, it was a while ago. It was more the Atkins diet at that point. But you couldn't really go and buy bars and powders. Nobody really, it wasn't worth anybody to do it at that point. So you'd end up having to go and get a Whopper and throw the bun away. Even at that point, I'm telling you, it's so early that you didn't even have the idea that these restaurants were used to somebody saying, hey, I want a Whopper without the bun. They would blow their mind, and they would cause, I don't like talking to people. So you just throw it away. You get a quarter pounder plain and then throw the bun, whatever. So I told him about that, and he's like, really? So then he went and got, I think I told this story like 2 weeks ago. He ended up where he went and got like 2 quarter pounders each meal, like for lunch and dinner. 2 double quarter pounders. Now this guy's huge, but more than not, that is, all protein, no carbs. So he's there and he's like, all right. And he'd eat those. So this whole month is going. I'm like, you still just doing it? He's like, yep, go and get my 2 double quarters. And then I'd see him when we'd leave work. We were right next to McDonald's, and I'd see him pull in. He'd get the stuff. And so, yeah, he's, oh, this is where he says, so that's why some weirdos kept showing up to my burger place and asked for, yep, bunless burger, fear monarch. It was that. Yeah, the Atkins days it was tougher doing things like that. You really had to like really figure out some stuff because there wasn't a lot of options. But again, also was that I was a younger guy and didn't really cook a lot for myself. But when I did, it was like a steak with like 8 pounds of bacon. But so this guy's going, he's getting his double quarters. And then he went to get weighed. He would have to get weighed each month. He had a lot of, imagine that he had a lot of health issues, a lot of ankle issues. So he ends up going, and they weigh him. He comes back, and he wanted to kill me. Now, luckily, he couldn't get around very well. I could avoid him. But he wanted to kill me because he gained 30 pounds. And for like a 700 to 800 pound man to gain 30 pounds, you could think that's easy for him to do. But it's really a lot easier for somebody to lose weight at that point. They only have to, like, if you change one little thing in your diet and you're 800 pounds, you're going to lose a lot of weight because of you stop drinking soda. You'll lose 50 pounds. It's crazy. But he's pissed. Oh, I followed this thing. What, you screwed with me. It was a prank or whatever. I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And he's like, I did what you said. And I'm like, let's get to the bottom of this here. What did you eat? He's like, I told you, I got 2 quarter pounders. I've said, you throw away the bun, right? Yeah, I didn't eat the bun. I didn't mind that much because of the fries. I was like, what? And what do you mean fries? He goes, you can't eat burgers without fries. he actually, but and then also then revealed that he got milkshakes each time too. So he not only was eating, because then you do the opposite. You're eating these quarter pounders now. It just is fat, fat, fat. Boom. But he ended up where he thought that what I told him the diet was is as long as you don't eat that bun and the burger, that changes everything, and you can eat whatever you want. Then it's like some people like, I'll admit that I don't like regular yeah, well, it is true, burgers and fries go great together, Fear Monarch said. I don't like regular soda anyway. I prefer diet soda. I don't like a lot of sweet things, and sometimes but there are legit people who think they're on the diet because they get a 40-piece nuggets and a diet soda. It's pretty crazy. But yep, I'm even putting the fries on the burger. What are you, from Pittsburgh? What are you, a Pomani sandwich here? Doc gonna show up with you? I don't mind fries. I'll even admit, things, again, this isn't on the diet, but when I do, I like, I'm like, my French comes out, and I do like dipping fries in mayonnaise. I don't mind that. I also put ketchup on hot dogs, and I don't give a shit. You can come at me. And I've had pineapple on pizza, and I'm from an area that prides himself in the pizza. I don't mind. It's a little different. But again, I love the people who, I say this all the time. A couple of people like, you put ketchup on hot dogs, and yet that person's bragging like, I put some escargot on it and this truffle fucking whatever. I'm like, really? Hoo-wee. Yeah, I'm going to do that. You'll have to tweet the Alice Springs recipe, chicken, bacon, a type of cheese, mushrooms. Man, that's actually like everything that I just bought earlier today too, because those are all free and clear. I'm going to check it out. Yeah, I actually, pineapple on pizza became like such a thing. But I like that tanginess that goes with it. I wouldn't eat it every time. It's not my favorite pizza, and I actually, a lot of people eat the pineapple on pizza as like that Hawaiian with ham as well. I just like the pineapple. I don't really like ham on pizza. Spam maybe, but not ham. But that's it. I see people bailing anyway. They're like, this is enough of this crap. But with that, thanks, everybody. A couple hours, I'll be back with the best of. If you want to join me then, we'll be reset. We can talk about a bunch of other nonsense, but I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go eat. I actually was planning on eating around 2 today, but, 4, and that's fine. Little fasting as well. So I'm going to play that song. It's just a song that was going to be about the question. It turned into something else. I did have it on the regular podcast. I still have to edit that. That's another thing. But with that, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Common Sense, for showing up and having a bunch of the chats and everybody else. I'm telling you, I am so hungry right now. I think I have low blood sugar. But all in all, yeah, thanks, everybody, as always. And I will talk to you all later.
Way up here in space, no one can hear you cry. In this cold-ass place, who are you to question why? Is this a setup, or are you just bad at this? You never let up, but there's so much you missed. But hand waves and question is why. The only question is why. If you don't care, I don't know why. I even try. The only question is why.